moving all the time.
Ready to go? Yeah. He did say that.
Blast off.
Where's my gavel? Thank you. We'll call the meeting to order for legislative session 2022-07 for April 19th, 2022. Those that would like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, please do. Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Entertain a motion from council to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion second. Any discussion or corrections on any of the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda has been approved. Next item on the agenda, we have a certificate of appreciation from Mr. David Shipley for his years of service with Acomacus County Energy Emergency Services. Energy. Dave, good morning.
Good morning. See, Dave, you're smart. You brought your wife with you.
If you want to get pictures, you can go up here as close as you want. You're not interrupting with anybody.
We have a certificate here to present to David. David's been with us for 15 and a half years, and I'll read this. This is from Wicomico County Council, and it's a great pleasure that the acting county executive and the members of the Wicomico County Council extend this certificate of appreciation to David Shipley for 15 and a half years of service. We commend you for your dedication to the citizens of Wicomico County, Maryland, while ever striving to exercise professionalism, good judgment, and fairness. We thank you for your ability to anticipate the needs of your community and for the grace you extend to the acting county executive, council, staff, and citizens. This is signed by acting county executive John Pisota and all the members of the Wicomico County Council. David, congratulations. Yeah, we'll say a few words.
I want to thank the council, and I do appreciate this, and I want to introduce, this is my wife, Paula. She's been my best friend and my wife for 46 years, and we're both ready to hang up the 24/7 on-call schedule that I have lived with for a long time. But I do want to recognize the members of the Department of Emergency Services. They're truly a dedicated bunch of professionals that I have been very honored to serve with in the 15 years that I've been here. So I thank you again for everything. Thank you.
Next, we have a special guest, Ms. Sally Rankin, for an introduction of the Maryland Court-Appointed Special Advocates Association. Josh, thank you. Good morning.
I'll just be brief and give a quick introduction, by the way. Sally is the program development specialist with Maryland CASA. She's had many years of course, the service with the state and with our community. Folks may not know, so I've been the last, a year and a half or so, I've been on the steering committee for the local CASA, which is the court-appointed special advocates. Worcester County's had a great program. We've been trying to think through and expand. How can we do more? And of course, I want to say thank you, Melissa, also others for all that you do. So we've had a good process. We just want to take a couple of minutes to show how we wanted to expand the good work that should be done. And I'll invite Sally to say a few words.
Thank you. Just a couple of minutes, I understand. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
In July, we will be launching in Wicomico County a court-appointed special advocates program. And I wanted to bring this to your attention for a couple of reasons. One is we need strong community support for this program to be successful. We have strong court support. And so let me give you just briefly, you may very well be familiar with the child welfare program. There are children who are abused and neglected in our community. And Department of Social Services gets a number of calls each month. Right before COVID in March of 2020, there were 270 calls, reports of child maltreatment in Wicomico County. And unfortunately, of course, those numbers decreased when schools closed and mandatory reporters didn't see children. So anyway, Department of Social Services works with those families and children, decides what the best outcomes are, and one of the outcomes is to be removed from the home. And that's where the courts get involved, because the Department of Social Services files with the court and asks for protection for those children. Why are the courts so interested in having a court-appointed special advocate program? The children have social workers who's DSS. They have attorneys. They have probably therapists and other professionals working with them. So why do they need what we call a CASA, court-appointed special advocate? Because what judges have found through the decades, in fact, CASA is a national program. There are only 3 counties in Maryland that do not offer CASA services to their children. They are Wicomico, Somerset, and Garrett counties. So it's time for us to do that. There was a CASA program in Wicomico County for about 6 years, 2002 to 2008. And what happened was there wasn't funding for Wicomico's portion of the program, so Worcester continued the program on its own. So that's why I'm here, to bring to you that we will be getting funding. The Department of Justice, through one of their offices, provides funding to state courts. And so the Administrative Office of the Courts, we've sought funding to begin July 1st for operations in Wicomico and Somerset counties. We expect to get some funding. I don't know how much we'll get. The first year, we asked for to be fully funded, but we can expect in the following years that the best we'll get would be 50% funding of the program. So we're here, I'm here to bring to your attention that we're going to be starting this program, looking for community support. You all know people who are involved in the community. We're looking for volunteers. CASAs are volunteers. It's a low-budget program, largely. CASA volunteers are assigned one case, and they stay with the case for the pendency of it, usually a couple of years. Usually the CASA volunteer becomes very close to the child. And the reason courts are so interested is judges find that, one of the judges locally told me, who handles child welfare cases, said that probably 80% of the time the CASA's report makes a difference in the placement of the child, the decision the court makes. Studies show that children with CASAs have better outcomes. They perform better behaviorally and academically in school. So those are really the reasons that the courts are so supportive. And the Maryland Judiciary provides a report to the General Assembly every year about CASA. And in their report, they said that there would be CASA, a program starting in Wicomico and Somerset County this year, and hopefully in Garrett later on this year. And they also did their own studies of the difference having a CASA makes early on in the case for that child, and it fewer placements and also earlier permanency, and that's what you want, is a safe and loving home for these children. So with that, I thank you for your attention. So in summary, how you can help is, first of all, spread the word about the need for CASA for volunteers. If you're a member of an organization or your church would like a speaker, we want to speak to people. We've been to 2 of the 3 Rotaries in Salisbury. We're going to be speaking to the retired Wicomico School Personnel Association. We've got that scheduled. We'll be doing a lot more once we get CASA certified. We're expecting that in the next couple of months, and we hope to have our funding approved. We hope to know that by the middle of May. So then you'll really see a push for some advertising and some, hopefully, more of a life kinds of presentations. But yes, help us spread the word. If you know, like I said, if you know groups that would like to have a presentation, we'd love to speak to them. Of course, we're looking for people to host fundraisers. We hope you'll consider us in your next budget cycle for funding. Anything you can do to help. And if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer them later, or come back again with the Lower Shore CASA director and let her do a presentation if you were interested. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I'll just say too, by the way, this was a really good group of retired judges and others who have all thought through what our CASA program should look like. And we've had a lot of community volunteers, so we've got a lot of good energy behind it. So if anyone can please spread the word, that'd be great. And I just want to say publicly thank you to all the folks who put that together. It's been a lot of the last year and a half with COVID trying to do all this virtually, but the Greater Salisbury Committee allowed the space to be used for we can to think these things through together. And so thanks to all who are involved in that, and I really look forward to seeing what comes out of it.
And just another quick comment. Thank you very much, Sally. In fact, I'm in one of those Rotary clubs that you've all given that presentation to, and it's a great program. And I'll apologize for not realizing that. I knew Wicomico had it at one point. So, yeah, we definitely need to bring that back. So, thank you very much.
Morning, Ms. Hurley.
Okay, good morning, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The first item on the agenda this morning is a public hearing on resolution number 36-2022. This is to adopt the 2022 Wicomico County Hazard Mitigation Plan. A public hearing notice was published in the local newspaper and posted on the county's website, and council had a work session on this request on April the 5th. And we have Mr. Lorenzo Cropper here, Deputy Director, Department of Emergency Services. If there are any questions.
I noticed your colleagues left as soon as you stood up, but they knew you could handle it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hurley. At this time, we open the floor for a public hearing on resolution number 36-2022. If you have any comments that you would like to make in reference to this particular resolution, come to the podium, state your name, your county of residence, and your concerns. This concludes the public hearing on resolution number 36-2022. Entertain a motion from council to approve resolution 36-2022.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion?
I'd like to thank Mr. Cropper and the Department of Emergency Services and the individuals that were here at the last meeting for working diligently on this. Thank you.
Mr. Carver, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Pardon me?
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
All those in favor of resolution number 36-2022 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes. Thank you very much.
Okay, next is a public hearing on the progress of the Maryland 19C-21 Community Development Block Grant Agreement or Grant Program. And we have Mr. Jesse Drewer here, Community Development Planner with the Department of Planning, Zoning, and Community Development.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. At this time, we open the floor for a public hearing on the progress of the Maryland 19CD-21 Community Development Block Grant Program. If you have any comments or concerns, come to the podium, please. State your name and your county of residence and those concerns. Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing. Good evening, or good morning, Mr. Drewer. How are you?
Good morning, sir. I will just give a brief update on where we stand with our housing rehabilitation program, which is funded by this grant. To date, since this program began in 2019, we have funded 4 septic system replacements, 6 well replacements, and 7 roofing structural home repairs, which totaled up to 17 projects since the program began in 2019. This grant had an overall minimum assist of 15 households. So to date, with half of the funds expended, we've already met the requirements of the grant. As you'll hear, and just with the next resolution, we're going to be partnering with, pending resolution, with Chesapeake Housing Mission to work to assist some additional citizens with ramps and home accessibility items as such.
Okay. Any discussion from council? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution 37-2.
We're not there
Sorry.
just yet.
I was wondering about that. This seems like a little bit different. In the way.
They go hand in hand, the public hearing as well as the next item on the agenda. So if you want, I'll just go ahead and introduce that item.
Thank you.
Okay. So next for your consideration is resolution number 37-2022. This is to amend the SFY 2019 Community Development Block Grant Housing Rehabilitation Program, and it is the Maryland 19 CD-21. This is to provide funding for ramps and home accessibility to the Chesapeake Housing Mission. And on the council table is a updated resolution. It's resolution number 37-2022. The only change is the intro paragraph that has been shortened.
Entertain a motion from council to approve resolution number 37-2022.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. We have a bunch of new people at the table. Good. Good to see everyone. If you could, introduce yourselves for the public and your position. We appreciate it.
Don Taylor, Executive Director, Chesapeake Housing Mission, one of the founding board members. Alan Brown.
Alan
is,
Brown,
founding board member.
founding board member and board member.
Lori Carter, the Planning Director for Wicomico County.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Okay, what we have here is an amendment to the grant that was just had a public hearing before now. We're looking to provide $30,000 of community development block grant funding to Chesapeake Housing Mission to assist with citizens who have requested for ramps and home accessibility items for their home. We've already have I believe it was in the packets, the grant amendment has been approved by DHCD pending county executive approval. And Mr. Taylor, if you want to explain kind of what it is that you're going to do.
Sure. We focused on people below the poverty level. That's where we focus all of our funds. We are a volunteer-based group. Our overhead rate is 9%. I would, besides Alan, people like David Downs and a lot of folks in our community came together to run this operation. Most of us do it purely as volunteers. Bill's worked on our projects before, and I think some of the other folks have too. And Joe, I was in your region on Friday, and a 71-year-old lady living east of Willards is trying to stay in her house. And it's going to cost us just about $2,500 to $3,000 to make that happen. And we're going to make that happen with grants like this. So we'd love to have you guys volunteer with us. It's an eye-opening experience. Get people out there with the folks that truly need it. MAC provides all of our referrals in Wicomico County for the most part. They do a tremendous job. And I just got to mention, Lori and Jesse and John have been great to work with, talking about how do we improve the lives of our citizens. And I think this is a great partnership.
Can you leave the information with Ms. Hurley? Because I've always been interested in that, and I've worked with Mr. Brown before. He's one of the busiest men in Wicomico County.
Yes.
Thank you for what you do.
I recently built a ramp for some folks in my district, and just about the time I got it done, I wished I'd have called on you. I didn't think it was going to be that much of a job, but I got it done on my own. But anyway, thank you for what you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
As we understand it with Councilman McCain, too, he's a very good supervisor
Oh, he is.
when it comes to manual labor.
Whenever we get the Wicomico Rotary Club going, I mean, it can't be done without him.
I appreciate that. I mean, how many have you done since this started?
We're hitting 750,
Wow. Yeah.
and that's in the 4 counties.
Yeah.
But right now, we have 55 on the waiting list, which is the highest it's ever been,
Oh, wow.
and 18 of those are Wicomico County. And just moving, because we started at 3 projects our first year, and now we're up to close to 120.
Wow.
Logistics have become huge, and lumber costs, which is where a lot of this
Right.
funding is going to go
Exactly.
to, is
Yep.
helping us with lumber costs. So,
Okay.
thank you all for allowing us to.
No, thank
Thank you
you.
for what you do.
Yeah,
Thank you,
great
Mr. Brown.
program.
We see you in so many different capacities. You're asset to our community.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor of Resolution 37-2022, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, resolution passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next
Thank
on the agenda is a Wicomico County Delegation Legislative Recap on the 2022 General Assembly session.
Good morning.
Come on, Carl. Good morning.
And we have a bunch of politicians under time restraint. What's going to happen with that?
We're used to it.
Very used to it.
3 minutes.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all taking the time to be here because I know you've just come off one heck of a couple of months there, and to say the least. And it doesn't end there, I know. But
If I can just jump in here, I'd say that Delegate Anderton came straight from Annapolis to a meeting in the city of Fruitland without stopping, and it looked like without sleeping, so.
That was a long night, brother.
Well, we do appreciate it because we know how busy you are on a regular basis, and taking the time to be here today. You're very welcome, and I'm sure the public appreciates it as well. So if you don't mind, I guess we could start from left to right if you want to do that, unless you have already designed any structure among yourselves.
No.
Okay. And for those that don't know any of you, just if you could please announce yourselves before you begin talking, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, and it's good to see everybody. For the record, Senator Addie Eckert, District 37, which is all of Talbot, all of Dorchester, 3rd, almost half of Caroline 2B, and then half of Wicomico County. So thank you so much. This was a remarkable year, as you know, coming off the pandemic with a lot of infusion of federal funds. We had a very interesting budget surplus of $7 billion. We've never been in structural balance before, and here we are for the next couple of years in structural balance. So that in and of itself is pretty remarkable. We hit the road running on the budget, as you can imagine. The Senate had it first, and we wound up passing a $61 billion budget, and was able to achieve that structural balance with a little over $600 million in reserve. We preserved $3.3 billion in cash reserves, $2.2 billion in the rainy day fund, and $1.1 billion in the general fund. We also, the governor, as you know, had the initiative of public safety, making sure we had some giving back funds through tax relief, and then health. And the legislature, again, also wanted to work with him to be able to have that kind of tax relief. So there was about $350 million that goes into that tax relief with regard to pension relief for those individuals, 100,000, making 100,000 and 150,000 per couple, about $1,000 per year that would be a tax credit, and then $1,750 if you're a couple. So that will be coming in the future years. In addition to that, there was some incentives for businesses who won't hire difficult to hire folks, and then a lot of miscellaneous sales tax relief for various things like dental supplies, blood pressure cuffs, diapers, things that were high commodity during the pandemic. In addition to that, there was about an 8% increase in the provider revenues for people who take care of disabled and community mental health services. So that finally is going to roll back, and that was also very important, because we had a banner year with regard to services in the community for those struggling with mental illness or autism. Crime prevention, about $110 million went into crime prevention and victim services, $8.8 million for gun tracing efforts, and scholarships for previously incarcerated youth. And those, in addition to that, we had a number of initiatives, as you know, for Wicomico County. Your alcoholic beverage bills passed for the banquet facility, and then for the dinner theater, the orphans court salary that we put through passed. And then there were a number of also initiatives, capital initiatives for Christian services, for the zoo, for junior achievement, and then additional funds into recreational. And I guess I'll stop with that. I could go on. I had a number of initiatives with regard to mental illness and suicide. Pardon? That's not everything covered. You can talk about more.
Thanks, Senator.
But anyway, that's just a general overview. The committee did a lot with reviewing the marijuana, adult use marijuana initiatives, and then a lot of workforce initiatives for our healthcare providers as well that I will continue to work on. So
Thank you.
with that, I'll wrap it up, but it was a pleasure to serve you and work with everybody. Found it very helpful to be a part of the council meeting during session, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Certainly a pleasure to be here and to be with you in person. And I certainly want to say I appreciate all the input that we receive while we're in session from the members, whether it's individually or by a council, whether it's through your letters of support. Just wanting to reiterate that those things are very helpful and very important. The senator covered a lot of the budget, so I won't go into that part. But in the House this year, we were able to have everybody together. I know if you remember last year, we had two separate chambers, and I had to run one of those, mostly with my colleagues here. But yeah. Yeah, he was the other ones. I had the trouble ones. But nonetheless, we were able to come together this year and be in one chamber, and which was very, very helpful for us to continue our work. With that being said, we still kept the Zoom options, or actually it was our sole option for our committee work. But again, I saw record numbers from citizens from the Eastern Shore to participate because they didn't have to drive all the way to Annapolis. So I just want to say that that's one thing I certainly would like to keep to some degree. Moving forward, I wanted to say thank you for this body and for the previous councils, as well as our former county executive, Bob Culver, for the support for the Salvation Army. We were able to get funding for the Salvation Army youth clubs to do renovations. And, you know, we know how much they're in need of support. And so with the legislative bonds, we were able to do that. So that's about $150,000. We'll be supporting those initiatives. The senator mentioned the Christian shelter. They'll also be getting some funds for a water cooler that they're in need of, as well as some other ancillary items. And so when we're able to bring that funding back to our community, to our district, it really helps them to a level that we probably will never even realize, because they're able to give back more to the citizens that they support. So I just wanted to highlight just a couple of those. I still serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee in addition to serving as Speaker Pro Tem. And for a couple of bills, I just wanted to highlight for mental health. One that I sponsored was House Bill 912 that really got to the insurance companies. And this one requires that they no longer balance bill citizens when they're unable to find a provider in the network. And that was very contentious, but it was very necessary. One of the main advocates that spoke on the bill and helped me all the way through the end was former City Councilwoman Laura Mitchell, just speaking about the needs that are so great. And the fact that, you know, us in a rural community, we find it hard sometimes to find a provider. And so our citizens were being tasked with bills like $2,000, $4,000 just to get mental health services. So I just want to make you aware that that passed, and it's something that, you know, our insurance companies were a little upset about, but, you know, I think at the end of the day, they know the benefit. And in the same vein about mental health, our first responders, we passed House Bill 581 that really speaks to the fact that when our first responders are in traumatic situations, they too need help. Our police officers, our dispatchers, our fire service. And so we passed the bill to make sure that when they do seek support and they get the peer support, that their privacy is held to the highest standard, that information is not getting out, so they're comfortable with getting that. So I just wanted to, you know, make sure our first responders are certainly aware of that. And then just in closing, because I don't want to take everybody else's remarks, but our colleges this year fared extremely well to full funding come 2024, which is something, you know, this delegation has been fighting for a long time. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And then I know the library director will speak to the benefits that the libraries will receive through this budget cycle. And then lastly, our tax relief that was that the senators brought up. You can tell I'm still thinking I'm in the House right now. But, you know, it was beneficial. Our diabetic products, you know, so many people need that support. And so that's certainly another area of support. And then, of course, our gas tax relief that was very beneficial for everyone. But again, it's a pleasure and an honor to serve District 37A, and certainly know that I'm willing to, you know, take on whatever the task may be, fight against bills, and and support bills and make them better, because that's really what it's about. At the end of the day, when we're fighting, you'll find that we have to have a seat at the table. You know, while bills come out and people, you know, fight against them, climate in particular and some other ones, if we don't have a seat at the table, a voice at the table, then you don't have anything. So I just want you to keep that in mind, you know, when people talk about some bills that we passed and you didn't like them. So, okay, thank you.
So as far as a voice at the table.
Yes.
You need to remind the public of your position in Annapolis?
Sure.
As
So
Speaker Pro
I
Tem?
am the Speaker Pro Tem, and when we have our leadership meetings, I, you know, have the opportunity to meet directly with the chairs of the committees and the Speaker and her leadership as far as the administrative side. And I say, look, this is not good for my citizens in Wicomico, and I feel like I also represent Somerset County as well, dealing with some of the natural gas line pipe issues as well as our oil industry. So anyway, you have to have a voice there, because if you don't, things will move by and things won't at least be so extreme, because we need to, you know, at least recognize where we are as a rural community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Delegate.
Good morning, everyone.
Still morning.
It is still morning. Yeah. Delegate Carl Anderton, blessed to represent the heart of Wicomico County in Annapolis. And I just want to echo the Speaker Pro Tem statement. You know, I go to her a lot during session. You know, I know when she sees me walk in her office, you know, she has this big, huge mirror that leans against the wall because it probably weighs about 1,000 pounds. It looks like it's the biggest mirror I've ever seen. It's supposed to be hung on the wall, but it's leaned up so she can see my reflection as I'm walking in. And you can hear a discernible kind of like, you know, because she knows I'm coming in asking for something because she's in those meetings, you know, and there are issues, you know, the that was a prime example, you know, that was kind of held up, not because it was a bad idea, but because we were near the end of session and they were trying to push through other items, and so they kind of set those bills off to the side, and, you know, she went and got them out. So, you know, anybody who becomes a judge in the orphans court, they need to thank Speaker Pro Tem for that, because she pulled those things through. But it was a good session locally. You know, again, all the local priorities were met. Had some wins in the budget that you've already heard of. So I guess I should take a second and talk about how we use our revenues.
Right here on the list, right here. Number one.
We left that for you.
That's what Sharon is Karen. That's what we do. So, we're family. I do want to say, I say this every year, but I don't want it to lose significance of how lucky I am to work with these people in Annapolis. Each one of us is different. Each one of us has areas where we're proficient. I have a lot of areas where I'm deficient. But when it comes together, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it truly is. It has truly been an honor to serve with everyone here and the ones that are not here. You know, Mary Beth and Wayne and Charles Otto. You know, it is just a truly, you know, I just hope it never gets lost that, you know, how dynamic this group is, and that I have been truly fortunate and been a better person by having these folks in my life as an individual. You know, a little more mature, you know, and things like that. But it's just been a real honor to learn from these folks. You all are my family and will be for the rest of my life. So back to infrastructure, how we use the revenues. As you know, HURs were dramatically cut about 10 years ago. We don't have to go back into that. And we've been working since we've been in Annapolis to bring these funds back. And it was a huge bipartisan effort. You know, I think one of the quotes I saw in the newspaper about the bill was that it had the most unique list of co-sponsors of any legislation I'd ever seen. I said, well, that fits. But, you know, we had gotten Wicomico up to a point where, you know, they were getting about $3.8 million a year. And now with this new legislation, you know, it goes, the new baseline goes to $4.7 million a year. But wait, there's more. There's a little bit of a bonus there in the middle between FY 25, 26, and 27. It's $5.5 million, $6.2 million, and $6.3 million to kind of have some extra funding there to take care of any bigger projects that we've kind of put off to the wayside, i.e. the West Side Collector Road or something like that, maybe, that we could get done. But, so it's a dramatic increase for the county, and this bill does not have a sunset, so we don't have to go back in 5 years and do it again. And each municipality gets a similar increase as well. So for folks who've been wondering why the roads and sidewalks haven't been fixed, this is why. And so as I said on an interview this morning, a few years from now, if they're still wondering, it is not y'all's fault why those things haven't been fixed. But a few years from now, it'll be y'all's fault. So, because this was a huge lift. We were told constantly that it wasn't going to happen, but we just never gave up. And, this team is amazing. And our colleagues from across the bridge, came together and did some really cool things. But I do want to thank you all for your input through session, each of you, especially Councilman Hastings and the council president, who I spoke to probably ad nauseum during session. And I just want to thank you all for that. You made our job much easier.
Thank you, Delegate.
Good morning, Council President.
Morning.
Cannon, Wicomico County Council. Speaker Pro Tem, I remember 2 years ago, your leadership as we had our House of Delegates divided literally in half. The joke within the party was that we were on the romper room side, so you had a lot of work to do. And I remember that fondly because that was important work that we were doing during a pandemic. And I've enjoyed our relationship together. We had a bill this year, the last day, it was one of Speaker Pro Tem's priority bills on resiliency and climate. I voted against this bill, and as colleagues do, she called me on the phone, which I've only gotten that call once or twice, and she said, "You voted?"
I remember that.
Well, then I remembered the bill, and so we do get an opportunity to amend our votes along the way. And we've found over the 8 years that I've been in the General Assembly, wide agreement, 8 out of 10 bills we all agree on. That was one that we could find bipartisan support. So I appreciate the opportunity to let me know what's going on and make sure on the Eastern Shore, because that bill had to do with sea level change and making sure that we're paying attention to what's going on. Dorchester County is a county that has those sort of challenges. It doesn't mean we're throwing money at problems, but we're being aware, we're being proactive. And so to that point, so the first thing I'll say to you is that this past year we passed congressional and legislative districts. And when we had this happen in December, I was very upset about how we drew the congressional districts. I watched firsthand during the hearing when they took the Bay Bridge and literally connected Annapolis and parts of Anne Arundel County with the first congressional district. I was so mad, in fact, that I signed on as a plaintiff in a lawsuit to say, no, I'm going to represent the voters of the first congressional district and advocate for putting that district back in a more responsible and respectful format. Let me just say, Governor Hogan and also Governor Ehrlich won with 50% of Republican votes, and yet this past legislative map would have almost guaranteed an 8-0 Democrat advantage. And when we went to the courts and we made our case, we actually won this. And I would say that in that process, the legislature came back and made a different map, fairer, but not as good as we would have hoped. But let me just say that in that process, I think we reminded not only Marylanders, but throughout the country that gerrymandering should not be accepted at any level. I think it takes away the citizens' rights to free and fair elections. And for our small part, and for my small part as a plaintiff, winning on this particular matter says that Maryland does vote for Republicans. And the question is, will they be represented in Washington, D.C.? And I believe that the old map would have said no. This map says yes. We had a few Republican candidates come forward. They're going to run, and I think that the Republican Party is a broad tent. It takes all types, very conservative, sometimes moderate. But in Washington, we need to make sure that Maryland is represented. So on that point, I would say to you that I'm very happy to have been part of that process and that we had a successful outcome. I serve on Economic Matters Committee, so I'm on the subcommittee of unemployment insurance, and I can tell you for 2 years I've worked very closely with the committee to make amendments and corrections to our policy with unemployment. I'm on Business Regulation Subcommittee. So last year, we had a bill that came forward, and I was heavily involved in the amendments to that bill, so much so that I was selected the Legislator of the Year by the Maryland Retailers Association. No lie, I'm a retailer, small business owner. I represent one of a handful of legislators in Maryland that have a pure business background, and I've worked very hard to make sure my voice is heard in Annapolis and that I can advocate. As Speaker Pro Tem said, we're trying to make bad bills go away, but if a bill is passing, we want to make it better. And I've reminded myself often how important that is and how a business person's voice matters in those matters. This year, with business regulation, and I'm going to leave Johnny and I talked. We're going to pick one, and he'll take the other. But we had two bills. One was on paid family leave, and the other was on climate solutions now. So I'm going to take the climate bill. We had a bill that came forward jointly signed by our committee and Environment and Transportation that would have banned natural gas, and it would have banned propane. And for the end result, the question is, can it be achievable? Is this a priority that can be done at any point in time in the near future? And if it happens, what's our plan? How are we going to heat buildings? And so this bill was amended both in our committee and Environment and Transportation. When it came out of the Senate side, let me just say we were very worried, and we heard from local businesses here in Wicomico County about the outcome. You know, Chesapeake Utilities just ran a major infrastructure line through Wicomico down to Somerset County, which were very important economic drivers for the Eastern Shore. And at the same time we're doing those things to improve the lives of Eastern Shore residents, here comes a bill that would have banned that. So I can tell you that I believe that the Eastern Shore delegation said, well, wait a minute, if we're going to pass a bill like this, you better have an answer, you better have a plan. And so the bill got amended in a way that I think is a little bit more responsible. We got rid of the part that banned natural gas and propane, and hopefully in the future legislature we're a little bit more careful about what it is that we're trying to do as a policy. Just last thing on paid leave, and I'll leave that one to Delegate Mounts. That is nothing short of a $1.6 billion payroll tax. It did get amended in the Senate. There's a study provision, meaning that we're standing up a major insurance program within the state of Maryland, almost of the same size as unemployment insurance when you think about the number of people that work in the Department of Labor. And the idea that we were going to do that without doing an actuarial study to understand how workable this is, that we're going to take and put this mandate on our employees and employers, are we going to be able to finance it? And there are some states, and Delegate Mounts might bring it up, like Washington State, that when they stood up their program, they had to backfill their program with over $300 million in general fund revenues to make sure that paid insurance, paid family medical leave program could still exist. So hopefully Maryland moves slowly. We did pass a bill, but I think it's going to be left to future legislatures as to what it looks like, what the percentages are for deductions. But make no mistake, this is an election year, and that is a tough bill to see come through with the idea that we're going to be passing these sort of payroll taxes. I'll be glad to answer other questions as we come along, but I'm trying to do this in a way where I give Delegate Mounts some meat on the bone. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Adams and colleagues. It's great to be with you. Johnny Mounts, for the record, District 37B, Talbot, Caroline, Dorchester, and Wicomico. And I think Delegate Adams has just recreated the definition of sharing, because there ain't nothing left.
Yeah, I did.
But that's okay. It's fine. It's fine. And since I'm going to take a second, since we were talking Delegate Shree Sample Hughes stories, and it didn't get mentioned today. This was a rough year for me. The session was, I'm not a fan of virtual legislating. The House operated differently than the Senate, and the House operated in a virtual format. In addition, we wore masks throughout the entire session while we're on the floor. And that is just not conducive to communicating, to sharing ideas. It sets the wrong type of mood for what happens in the legislative process, and you're aware of that. I mean, we're accomplishing so much more by being here in the room together. Long story short, we get to the very end of session. I had a personal issue, the stomach virus that's been going around. It struck me down pretty hard, but I made it. It was Monday, and we were going into session, and we had the morning session, and we had an afternoon session. And then early in the afternoon session, the speaker took a leave. And then all of a sudden, the Speaker Pro Tem was at the gavel, and we had a pile of bills. All of our good bills were actually in the stack to get through that afternoon. It's a legislative tactic, and it's fair. I mean, that's how you do legislating. In order to push some of the more controversial bills through, you keep the good bills at the very end. Well, let me tell you, our good bills were at the very end. And our good bills, like highway user revenues and things like that, would have never seen the light of day except for Delegate Shree Sample Hughes when she got up there and she said, has everyone recorded their vote? If your vote wasn't on the board, that bill was gone, and it was good. The speaker goes at a pretty fast pace, but she is not up to Delegate Shree Sample Hughes' pace. She whizzed through a stack of bills nonstop. We voted on Monday from 6 p.m. until 12 a.m. nonstop, and I think that tempo is different than I've experienced in my 8 years in the House of Delegates, because we're in election year. So there were controversial bills that had to have been passed early enough for the legislature, if they wanted to override the governor's veto, that they would be able to do that. And we had that cycle, but it changed the way bills flowed through the legislature. So ordinarily, these bills would percolate and they would get organized and they would be panned out over the weekend before the sine die. That didn't happen, and the controversial bills were addressed, and then we got to sine die, and we had a stack of bills that we had to get through, but there really wasn't a rhythm or a mojo to get that done. So I want to take a second just to thank Delegate Shree Sample Hughes for running that the way that you did, because it's not easy. From both sides, people are trying to do all kinds of things, and they can get out of control. As I said, you've heard a lot about the session. It was overshadowed by a number of things. I think the budget surplus was a big deal, and it drove a lot of things. The redistricting debate, that drove a lot of things. It's good that the budget was controlled. It's good that the budget was balanced. It's good that we're in a AAA. However, you need to look at our spending. I mean, the budget increased greatly this year, and it increased because of federal money. And I can't remember the last time the budget actually went backwards. It always seems to go forward. So looking forward to the next year, I think it's something to be very mindful of. If there's a budget increase, how are we going to sustain this level of funding? I believe the total was $61 billion, and that's a point for everyone to keep in mind, because we need to have these programs that are critical to make sure they're online and they're getting the funding they need. And if that funding isn't available next year, that should be a priority for everyone to keep on their radar. There were most of the bills have been discussed. The one, and I'm on the Economic Matters Committee, both Delegate Adams and myself. We both debated and worked on the Climate Solutions Now Act, which Delegate Adams described, and we were able to change that. But the point is that bill has still implemented a target for a net zero greenhouse gas emission, 2045. The reality is that there are some major decisions and some major realities that need to take place pretty quickly. So the fact that natural gas has not been banned should not be an ultimate relief. This is a point of major concern. If we're going to rely on electrification, how are we going to get that electrification? Where is it going to come from? This process of environmental protection is being played out across the country in many different ways. And in some places there are successes, but we have seen places where they don't have electricity. There are brownouts, there are problems, and so it is a significant concern, especially to us. We use energy differently than a lot of other places in the state of Maryland, and if we can't get our energy and we can't function, once supply chains and you call it work cycles, things like that, once they're out of whack, it's very hard to get them back in line. The other bill that Delegate Adams mentioned that is a major concern is the paid family and medical leave. He's correct. It is estimated to be a $1.6 billion payroll tax. The funding for this program comes directly from paychecks from employees. Employers will pay some also. In other states where this has been implemented, the cost estimates were actually a lowball, and they turned out to be more expensive. This approach includes the Department of Labor administering a state-run insurance program, which would include hiring 400 new employees at the Department of Labor. And when you get into the details of how this is set up, it is very similar to unemployment. And as a representative, I think all of us are not satisfied with the experience we've had with the Department of Labor. I know our citizens aren't. I'm still working on unemployment claims. And this will probably undoubtedly be set up under the same scenario as Beacon. And in addition to that, the cost of this program is going to be spread, not just in the private sector, it's also going to be in the public sector. And so how it's going to play out, I really cannot say, other than the advocates are very unwavering. Paid family and medical leave is a very important issue. I mean, it's a real issue for a lot of people. I've experienced it in my lifetime. Most people have been in that situation where you've got to go to work, but you've got responsibilities that you have to take care of. So it's not a lighthearted issue, and it is not a political issue in that Republicans and Democrats, are on one side or the other. I think it's more about the approach to how we address that issue. We left the session with a modicum of some sessions will end. The 2021 session, when it ended, it was a pretty rough time. I mean, there were a lot of disagreements. We weren't able to get into some of the lingering problems from police reform. We weren't able to resolve a lot of the issues with health officers and the role of government and the powers of government. We weren't able to get into many of the issues that are linked directly to education and what's going on with boards of education and in our schools. There was a virtual school bill that was passed that's going to be problematic, that's going to undermine our existing virtual school program. And I think one of the most important things for everyone to keep in mind is we weren't able to rectify the problems with Kerwin and the education funding mandates. And that will be an issue for the future for everyone to keep in concern. Otherwise, that's pretty much a wrap from the session. I hope I haven't taken too much time, so thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Any, Joe? Yeah. Apparently, we had 3 bills that the council was interested in that didn't make it. The gray water bill, the transparency for the Board of Education, and the landlord bill. Is there any comments on why they didn't go anywhere? Or, yeah.
So the transparency bill, is that the bill that I sponsored? So I sponsored, so the council,
it was with Senator Eckert. It wasn't introduced in the House.
Yeah, so I had a transparency bill in the House, and it did not pass, but it generally related to interfacing the committee from the statewide Kerwin Commission implementation.
This was a transparency bill that for the Board of Ed that other counties that has executives have that we don't have, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put one in to disclose curriculum and put that, and we wanted to have that available for.
You pull your mic closer, yeah.
Yeah, we put a bill in that would have allowed curriculum and syllabus to be put up online and family members to be able to access that so they would know what was in that curriculum. And that did not pass, yeah. We had a hard time getting bills through this year. It was the most unusual years I've ever seen. Bills that were very important to many of our counties that passed in the Senate the first week never saw daylight. So we had difficulty with many bills, and I don't know what was going on in the House, but that's where we seem to have all the problem.
Yeah.
And we had to chase around after our bills on a regular basis. So I think there was a lot of negotiating with the budget, and each one of the houses had a wish list where things were fenced off. So they determined the priorities, and there was a lot of negotiation, and those priorities were also through legislation. So when you're working with the budget, you have to make sure that certain pieces go through. And I think those priorities made a difference in how bills were passed.
Our landlord bill, that's kind of, how many years, John, has that been?
That never went in.
Chris took the initiative to try to get something through.
Right, so you're catching three bills. The landlord tenant bill, the eviction bill, I brought as a statewide bill. There was a senator from Anne Arundel County that tried to do it as a local bill. You want me to go into some background on
If you
that?
could be very brief, Chris, I appreciate it, because we are on a time restraint.
So let me just say that the bill is close to passing. The challenge is going to be whether or not we can get the sheriffs on board with what happens the day after an eviction. So there's this point in time where we're saying, okay, if we don't get the bill passed, all the furniture goes out on the street, all the personal belongings go out on the street, and what we're trying to do is trying to adopt some policies that are more humane, more responsible. And the challenge becomes then, do you allow some point after the day of eviction for people to reclaim their property? And of course, that doesn't work because that would require the sheriffs to come back. So let me just say, I think the legislature heard in a bipartisan way that this is a challenge, and that Wicomico County has tried a few years to get this through, and the opportunity is to do this in a way that's a little bit more humane. So.
The third one, Joe?
Gray water, the gray water.
Right. So the gray water bill, I came here with the property owner who had some challenges, and all I can tell you is Senator Eckhart has been leading the response, trying to get the local health department, both from the environmental side and the health side, to come up with a local solution. The statewide bill became problematic about, I don't know, halfway through session. I'll leave it like that. It was a fairly innocuous bill that created some controversy.
Well, I just knew that, that was three bills that the council, had interest in and sent up, and
Yeah, some of those weren't delegation bills, though.
No, they're not.
No, so I just want to be clear about that.
That's right.
The delegation bills, I made sure we
all
did our
passed.
best to get those through.
Yeah.
Individual bills, that's a whole nother story. Those bills that you referenced, they're still in committee, or still were in committee. The other thing I'll say about gray water, the title and the language needs to be revised.
Yeah, they were hung up on the word gray water. And so, it's a gray water bill, we're not doing.
John, can you pull your mic close? I don't think anybody can really.
Sure. Yeah, so it was, the word gray water was the issue with the legislation. And, we had a couple of different approaches we could have took with the bill. We all chose one approach. And that was the hangup, was once they saw gray water, then they didn't want to hear anything else about it, because they thought we were trying to circumvent the system. And so,
So you're saying we need to rename that water?
It's a bit of a technical foul. I mean, for me personally,
Yeah.
I think the best approach is just to have the facility regulated as a food truck, because it's very similar, minus the wheels. That's the only difference, is it doesn't have wheels, but it's a temporary thing that is, quasi-transient with holding tanks. And so I think, if we can find a way to get the business open this year, I think if we come back next year with that legislation, we'll have a better chance at success.
Well, we do appreciate, again, you taking your time to be here very much. I think I speak for the council, local businesses, and the community as a whole, where I think we're very grateful to have the individuals here that we do, and those that couldn't make it on our Eastern Shore delegation, whether you're in the Republican Party, whether you're in the Democratic Party, both ends of the spectrum, you all do really great work for us, and it's always enjoyable working with you. And again, thank you, and anytime open conversation, we always welcome it. So, thanks again.
I just have a quick question. Can you just tell us a little bit about the local initiatives in the capital budget? Because we're not familiar with some of those.
Which ones in
Like
particular?
which
There was junior achievement.
That was $1 million?
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
This, for the
Yeah.
building.
Yes. That was in the governor's budget.
Okay.
And what, Salisbury Zoo?
Yeah.
250,000.
Yeah.
it was a
And then-
request from the city. The rail trail was a request from the city. The junior achievement, they're going to take the old Kmart building and turn it to a finance park. for financial literacy, something that we've been trying to change in Annapolis for quite a long time now. We got that through the House, but the Senate didn't agree with financial literacy, just to throw a little shade back in. So this is going to be a tremendous project. We have agreements with all, with 8 Maryland counties on the Eastern Shore, 2 in Delaware, 1 in Virginia, and a facility right here in Wicomico County.
Right.
And then the Christian shelter.
Yeah,
had 2 different projects, and they're expanding and meeting a rural community need there in that section of town.
Thank you for pursuing that. I know they've been priority on the county for a while, so thank you.
So they got over 200,000, because one was 176,000, and then the other was 50-something.
2 projects.
Yeah, 2 projects.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Good seeing y'all.
Okay, the
Thanks
next
for
item
everything
on
you
the
do.
agenda is the submission of the fiscal year +23 operating and capital budget. And we have our acting county executive, Mr. John Pasota, here.
Thank you.
Good.
Hi, Eddie.
Dave, did the ice cream truck just go by?
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Dave? Dave, did the ice cream truck just go by?
Thanks, man.
Did we miss it?
Big fat book. Operating and capital. All at once.
Better than last year.
You gonna give us a quick overview,
Absolutely.
acting county executive?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And I left my glasses in my office.
You want mine?
No, I think I've got it large enough, but thank you. I think. Good morning.
Good morning.
I hereby submit to the County Council and the public my proposed budget for the fiscal year 2023, commencing July 1st, 2022, and ending June 30th, 2023. I'd like to thank the citizens who offered their feedback during the public hearing held on March 16th of 2022. As you review the budget, I will point out a few highlights to same. The budget is balanced as required by the charter. Focus of the budget is to address Wicomico County's core service needs: public safety, health, education, and infrastructure. There are no increase in real or personal property tax rates. Effective real property tax rate decreases due to the revenue cap. Revenue growth of 7.6%, including funds from the American Rescue Plan and use of general fund unassigned fund balance. Real property net assessable base increased 4.43%, resulting in our tax rate decreasing from 0.9195 to 0.9070, just over a cent. Projection for income tax revenue is $63 million, or an 11.7% increase. Funding $6.2 million in CIP, using approximately $4.9 million in fund balance. We're staying under our principal and interest policy of 12%, with a 7.96% P&I budget. Implementing our pay study with new salaries for most employees and a retroactive payment for those employees, those same employees, for the last fiscal quarter of this year. We're increasing funding for fire and EMS by $80,000 from general fund revenues, and recommending an implementation of a length of service award, or a LOSA, to try to retain and recruit volunteers. These two together represent a 24% increase to their funding. Increasing Board of Education funding to account for maintenance of effort and funding capital projects for Mardella High School renovation and the Y High roof renovation. $325,000 for fund efforts to create sewer service in the areas of county funded with the ARPA funding, and creation of a $500,000 grant program to help homeowners who have failing septic systems funded by ARPA funding. We in Wicomico County face the same economic challenges and uncertainty as the rest of the country at this time. My proposed budget reflects our best effort to meet those challenges given our current circumstances. And having said that, I respectfully submit that to the council.
Thank you, Acting County Executive. Any brief questions and overview? We will have a lot of time to discuss the budget in detail as we move forward, and we are under time restraints this morning. But go ahead, Joe.
You, on the fire and EMS service, I suppose you had a discussion with fire and EMS about this. Were they satisfied with this?
We've had budget discussions with them, yes. The final result is what's in the budget, no.
Yeah, what I'm saying about the increase, the payments over, for service.
The length of service award, yes.
So they seem satisfied with that, or they were happy with that, or?
My understanding is yes.
Okay, all right, okay.
They're been made aware of the award program, yes.
Okay, all right.
The increased tax revenue, I'm assuming, any real feel for why that's developed the way it is?
I mean, in the last couple of years, there has been overall federal tax changes to income tax, which ultimately, because Maryland is in some ways a piggyback and the county is a piggyback state, has made changes, but this has been something that's been experienced across the state. So we're not the only ones who have seen these increases. And as you saw in our audit, and as we're seeing in this year's results, we are still experiencing those increases, and thus we are budgeting to recognize those.
Thank you.
Well, I just had a question about the tax revenue cap. I've had several citizens reach out to me, and you may or may not be able to answer this. Several citizens reach out to me and with the assumption that the tax cap limits teacher salaries. I don't know how the two play in there.
So they aren't.
They're not related.
Tied. The tax cap limits the amount we could potentially give to the Board of Education.
Okay.
But that is the only correlation I would. There's no legislative thing that says with the tax cap we can't.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was completely clear on that. Because
yes, the tax cap impacts what we can spend, and the Board of Education receives a healthy amount from the county, and so. Part of the reason part of the reason the state has the implementation of the maintenance of effort is that you have to continue to maintain your effort to your Board of Education, but that is what we have been able to maintain and not been able to really go above that.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Hurley, are there allowances in place that allows us to go above that for additional spending for the Board of Education?
Yeah, my understanding that there was.
There's certain things but they have to, and we had talked with the Board of Education. There's certain timelines, we've passed that timeline for this fiscal year, that you can go above that number for specific items, but you have to declare those to the state by a certain deadline. That deadline has now passed, because if we up our number at this point in time, that then gets built into our base.
Right.
So there are specific things. We did ask the Board of Education if there was anything that they needed in those specific things, and they did not request anything.
I think they have to present that by March 1st, if I'm not mistaken.
I want to say it was March 31st, but it's sometime in the March timeframe. You could have the right date yourself. So I just know that when we met with them and discussed it, there was a timeline, and it was a mutual decision that there wasn't anything going to be submitted.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
I think the key is that the tax rate is going to be lower with the increase in the assessable base and the tax cap, then the tax rate is going to be lower for the citizens of Wicomico County. I think that's always a plus. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you over the coming few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I'll just mention I'll be sending out some dates to council members, coordinating some budget sessions in the near future.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley.
And we can have the public hearing on the budget on May 3rd.
Okay. We are looking at having the public hearing for the constant yield on the second meeting of May, just so to put that on the radar. I have that penciled on my calendar to get that advertisement in. So constant yield budget or public hearing would be the second meeting of May.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda for your consideration is Resolution Number 38-2022. This is to appoint the Board of Managers of various public drainage associations within Wicomico County. The proposed names to be appointed are shown in the resolution, and they'll be listed in the record. And we do have Pam Olin here, Director of Finance, if there are any questions.
Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution Number 38-2022.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 38-2022, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Okay, next is Resolution Number 39-2022. This is to certify the drainage tax roll to the Department of Finance as requested by the Board of Managers of the Public Drainage Associations. The tax levies are also shown in the resolution, and they'll be entered into the record as well.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution Number 39-2022.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Thank you.
The next item for business is Resolution Number 40-2022. This is confirming the reappointment of Phyllis T. White, CPA, to the Audit Committee.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 40-2022.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Next is Resolution Number 41-2022, confirming the reappointment of Ralph E. Capon to the Audit Committee.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 41-2022.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Okay, next is Resolution Number 42-2022, confirming the reappointment of Dr. Thomas G. Keaton to the Audit Committee.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 42-2022.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Next is Resolution Number 43-2022, confirming the reappointment of Tony C. Nichols to the Audit Committee.
Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution Number 43-2022.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Okay, next is Resolution Number 44-2022. This is confirming the reappointment of Andy Kim, CPA, to the Audit Committee.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution Number 44-2022.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, this is Legislative Bill 2022-05. It's an act to repeal and adopt the Wicomico County Classification and Pay Plan for the purpose of providing certain changes to grades and titles and generally relating to the governance of the personnel of Wicomico County.
Entertain a motion from council to introduce Legislative Bill Number 2022-05.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Owen? Mm-hmm.
Good morning. I wanted to make one recommendation to council. So the resolution that you have has the titles listed, And then there's a tab attached that is part of the pay structure, but not all of it. My recommendation is that the council adopt, if they're going to adopt this legislation, adopt it with just the title section as the attachment, in the fact that we're including the pay ranges in the budget. The reason being is the budget is a document that gets implemented every year, and so the pay ranges can be in the budget, and that would set the ranges for the year for the pay plan, versus putting it in this in this legislation requires a 60-day waiting period and all that. And so the titles can be adopted this way, but my recommendation is that the ranges be adopted in the budget, and you will see in your budget document, I have those two tabs in there. So that is my recommendation.
She keeps pointing at me when she's throwing her hand out.
Oh, okay, I'll do both.
Mr. Mitchell?
I would suggest if that is done, if the council decides to do that, that they adopt the titles with language saying that the actual amounts are subject to change in each budget.
And that's perfectly, I'm fine with that kind of language.
So we've got one pay classification, I think, that we need to address, and that's the county council administrators. Wasn't that?
Yeah.
So we would be making that amendment, if we were to choose to do so, we would be making that in this legislative bill as opposed to the operating budget, correct?
Well, but in the operating, 2020, it would have to be both,
Okay.
because 2020-09 does not allow us to pay anybody more than what is listed in the budget.
Okay, so we would have sort of two amendments. One would be to acknowledge that we are removing this section from the legislative bill as it is, the addendum. I'm calling it an addendum.
Correct.
With the caveat, as Mr. Mitchell suggested, that it would be in the operating budget. And then the second amendment is going to be what Mr. Holloway, Councilman Holloway is suggesting as far as changing one pay structure for this legislative bill.
Let Mrs. Hurley comment on that.
I just want to bring to council's attention that the charter, section 601, is where the pay and classification plan is to be approved by council. And that charter section says the council can modify or revise the plan. That's pretty much open as to what council can do. But because this is being tied to the fiscal year 23 budget, there are restrictions. With the budget, council can only delete or decrease items. You cannot add. You cannot change revenue estimates unless you're correcting a mathematical error. So there are restrictions on what you can do.
That's what we've discussed this. And Mr. Wilbur and I both opine that the classification should be done by bill, which the budget would satisfy that problem. But it would, if it was done by a separate bill, it would allow different changes. The budget doesn't allow that. It doesn't allow increases. So it's a bit of a quandary.
But the budget is submitted with specific, with a personnel, position description, and it lists out titles and dollar amounts. And so the legislation that council passed 2020-09 does not allow finance or any department to pay above what is listed in the budget.
The question becomes, can the executive amend his own bill before it passes, thereby raising that one issue that's under consideration?
Mr. Wilbur?
I think that's your question.
I'll defer to Mr. Wilbur.
Well, the only section in here in this current legislative bill that references, I guess, that references what Mrs. Hurley was concerned about is the section that says Maine County salary structure, because that's the only area where it actually deals with numbers.
Well, unless you're
pay numbers, the other rest of it deals with.
Unless you're envisioning changing somebody's grade.
Mm-hmm.
So titles are tied to a grade, and then in the budget, the grade has a range. So unless you feel the grade is not appropriate, the legislation recommendation would be to just take off the salary and add the language that Mr. Mitchell suggested that says that the ranges are attached to the budget document on an annual basis.
Did you all get the internal auditor's memo and his analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. It really explained the Bolton recommendations very clearly. Thank you.
Pam, could they change the pay grade without changing the salary amount in the budget? Is that a possibility?
As long as the grade allows for the salary that's in the budget to be within the range. So if you could change the grade on this, and you could, on the budget, then also on the position control document, change the grade, as long as it doesn't change the dollar amount, increasing the dollar amount of a position. You can, so, yes.
I guess the issue is the dollar amount or the grade?
Well, that's up to council, but I thought that it was the issue of the grade.
I think what the issue was not necessarily the pay now, it's a future, right? Correct?
If we were to read this.
That is correct.
But it just sounds, I'm trying to simplify this, but it sounds like to accomplish what Joe just mentioned, if we just did the grade regarding that one particular position, we've accomplished this.
You can accomplish a change of grade.
It's going to be in two, it's going to be in this legislation and in the
Correct.
operating budget.
Correct, because again, when you see the very first tab of what you have, it has a position control document that lists out every title and every old grade, new grade. And so you would have to, in that legislation, amend the new grade. And so this legislation would be you take off the one tab, and if you want to make that change to a grade, you would make that the attachment, sorry, I was trying to combine addendum and attachment in the same word, and it wasn't working. Then you would also have to amend that one line.
I don't know how we're going to be able to make an amendment to the grade if we remove the attachment.
No, I'm asking you to remove the attachment of this,
The dollar values.
The dollar value.
That section of it only.
This section only. That's
Okay.
all I'm asking for that to be removed.
That was only included as a reference.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
not part of the bill. It's
So
just
that
your
is-
Excel spreadsheet. That's the exhibit.
Okay, the way it prints from the briefing book, it made it appear that it was an attachment.
Okay, so
Then
there
there's
is nothing.
to, as long as everybody, but
Okay.
if you would like language to be added that says that the pay structure is, the pay ranges are listed in the budget on an annual basis, that would then tie the two pieces together. You would have the grades in this and say that your budget has the ranges.
Okay, so, Joe, you were talking about changing this pay grade. Do you have the specific one you want to, because it would have to be in the form of amendment to this bill?
Or what are those two grades?
I believe it's currently a M40, and without changing the salary, it could go up to a M41, because there is overlap on the salary ranges. And Pam, if you want to just confirm that for me, since you have it right in front of you.
I need to pull one more thing. But the range, it works, but give me 1 second to pull something else.
What was the other one, Joe? Or Laura, what was the other one?
The only one that I'm aware of is the one that we were just discussing.
The M40 to the M41?
Yes.
And we agreed to do any changes as far as pay. We're going to do that at a later date, correct, in the budget?
If we're cutting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would have to be in the budget.
right, okay.
And so we're.
But we need to do an amendment to do that, right?
You do.
You will, yes.
But we can discuss that during the work session.
That'll be something we're doing on the operating budget, changing the,
Yeah, but we have to do an amendment to this.
not to this. No, the only thing we're doing here are grades. The only thing.
Yes, you could go from an M40 to an M41
This
and
is-
still keep within the range of of the position that you're talking about.
Okay, you put that in the form of amendment, Joe?
Sure. Make an amendment on legislative bill 202205.
Second.
Did we amend it from M40 to M41?
There's a motion, we have a second. Discussion.
What is the it?
Well, you got to identify the position.
It's council administrator,
Council
correct?
administrator, yeah.
And that was, say again, that was moving from M40 to M41. Okay.
Okay, any further discussion, clarification, and all those in favor of the amendment to change the pay grade from M40 to M41 on the council administrator, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, amendment passes. Any further discussion on the legislative bill?
To our county attorney, council attorney, we don't need to do any amendment to place this pay cut into this bill as far as into the budget that we,
The pay cut's on a different,
right,
yes.
okay.
You can decrease in the budget.
Okay.
And so since you're going to be doing it as part of the budget, yes,
So-
you could do that.
So we don't need to do an amendment on this? Okay, all right, thank you.
That's for later.
I mean, it'll have to be amended at some point
Yeah.
unless it comes to you.
Right, okay.
And I'm assuming that any reductions that might be suggested would then not be in violation of what we're passing today as far as,
As long as you keep it within the range. So you would have to keep it within the grade range of all the positions. So whatever the position is graded at, you could only go to the low end or
think
the
we- I
high
think-
end.
knowing what position that is the most extreme recommendation that some are anticipating with that conflict with the range.
I believe the answer, I don't know the full number that you're looking to go down, but potentially, yes.
What would be the maximum number it could be adjusted to? I'm putting you on the spot, but you're really good at that.
Give me 1 minute.
Take your time.
Can you, just to make sure can you say which position you're talking about so that
I think it's a purchasing.
Purchasing agent, yes.
okay. So the purchasing agent is listed as an M44. The low end of that range is 93. It is,
We need to change the grade on that too, if we wanted to go lower than that.
Yes, you would.
Yeah.
but you'd have to do that in this
You
document.
have to do that today, or start it today.
What's the justification for that?
Wanted to go lower than 93.
No, what's the justification for going lower than 93? I mean, do you have information on other than what the Bolton study has?
Well, we're talking about from 70,000 to, so that's $23,000 increase. I mean, is council?
Right, but it's not the amount of money, it's what the position, that position that they've identified, that's the pay range.
And
So,
that, Bill.
In looking
Right.
at that position, not considering any person that is in that, if you lower the grade, it makes us, per what we have received from Bolton, it makes us uncompetitive in the market to be able to hire somebody else for that position.
Do you have that documentation that we could review? Because we had received very little correspondence from Bolton. So just that study was all that they gave you? I mean, I have to say.
We have not seen what other areas are making.
I guess if we lower the grade, would that still, the high end of that lower grade would still put us in an area to compromise, I'm assuming? The high end of that lower grade.
It depends on how far down council is
If it
suggesting.
went down one grade.
One grade takes it down to an M43, 86 to 120.
So
Yeah.
we'd still be in the operating realm. So taking it from that M what, I'm sorry?
M44 down to an M43. Again, based on a independent company's recommendation, a purchasing agent should be an M44 based on our structure across the county and everybody else within the county and how other counties view that position.
Would it be helpful to
As
have-
well as a specific request of Bolton to further back that up, and I believe that the council has a copy of that letter.
So we have one amendment that has passed, M40 to M41. Are there any other amendments?
I'll make the amendment to lower that grade from M44 to M43.
Motion, second?
Second.
Okay, motion, second. Any further discussion?
I would really like to speak with Bolton, just to get the other supporting documentation, discuss with them how they came up with this recommendation.
We've asked for that information numerous times and never been furnished it, so.
It makes it hard to make a decision, and this is,
Oh, yeah. I know.
this body is charged with making this decision.
Correct.
7 of us are, and so.
Didn't they respond to us and say that it was based on the information they compared to other
Yes.
counties? I mean, what else can they say? I mean, that's what it's based on. I mean, that's what they did. That's
Well, I
what
mean-
a salary study is.
I understand, but also with the the council administrator, they didn't quite understand how our office works. We have 2 people there, and so I guess I'm just wondering with this purchasing agent, I just have more questions for them. I would just like to know how they came to this, what was the county structure, I mean, they had different counties, but they're structured differently than ours are. So did they look at that?
I mean, you know, there's something that I don't know, that if Bolton took this one position and then took the number of departments in the county and said, okay, he's doing purchasing for all these departments, okay. But we also know that some departments do their own purchasing. So, you know, did they factor that in? We don't know that.
I don't know if they
you know.
looked at the job description to see if it was what Hartford County's purchasing agent also does.
But even if we lower this rate or this grade, we're still within the range that Bolton had suggested.
So why lower it then?
I think the
We're
idea
still
of
within the
lowering-
range. if you leave
To
it
give us
same
the
grade.
option if we needed to do it.
Right, but if you're on the lower end of the range where it is versus
be-
the higher end of the range, when it gets lowered, it's still in the same range.
I think we're not quite sure where we're going to land yet, but we wanted to have that flexibility. John, you were going to make a comment?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. So the amendment is to go from a 44 to a 43, which would adjust the range to an 86 to 120, which we're not voting on the range, but just so everyone's aware
Correct.
of what that range would be.
That's for the purchasing agent.
Yes. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Chair votes aye, but let's do a roll call just to make sure. Councilman Ackley?
Opposed.
Opposed? Josh?
I'm opposed to the change.
Opposed to the amendment?
Wait, I'm
Start
sorry,
over.
I'm
opposed.
No, it's too
One more
late.
time, say it
Too
one more
late.
time, please.
Are you in favor of amending the legislative bill to reduce it from an M44 to an M43?
Yes.
Yes. Councilman Hastings?
Nay.
Councilman McCain?
Nay, opposed?
Vice President Davis? Councilman Holloway?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd?
Yay.
And Chair votes aye. So that the amendment to change the range from an M44 to an M43 passes. Any other discussion or amendments? Mrs. Hurley?
Mrs. Olin, by making these pay grade changes, does that impact anyone's exempt status versus non-exempt status? No. Okay.
No.
Okay. Sounded like a good question. Okay, seeing any other discussion or recommendations for amendments? No. So what we will do is, hang on a second. Let me get back to the place. Sorry. So, all those in favor of the introduction of legislative bill number 2022-05 as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Roll call. Councilman Dodd?
Aye.
Councilman Holloway?
Aye.
Vice President Davis? Opposed. Councilman Ackley?
Aye.
Councilman Hastings?
Aye.
Councilman McCain?
Opposed?
Chair votes aye, so it's a 5-2. The introduction of legislative bill number 2022-05 passes as amended. And we do appreciate your input on this very much. I know we don't agree on this, but still, I think it's a healthy debate. And sometimes we are going to have a difference of opinion on some things.
Understood.
It gives the county executive the flexibility also, both. So,
Mr. Mitchell? Before you move on to the next item, we can have the public hearing on that bill on May the 17th.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Mr.
Okay, this is legislative bill 2022-06, the annual budget and appropriation bill of Wicomico County, Maryland, to adopt the county budget consisting of the operating and capital budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, the governmental and enterprise funds budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, the anticipated grant funding budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022, the FY 23 position changes for budget, the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, the FY 23 pay scales for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, the FY 23 proposed capital budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, and the appropriate funds and to appropriate funds for all expenditures for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022, and ending June 30, 2023, as here indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I would want to add, if I could, please, clarification on the bill that we just passed as amended, that there was, it was mentioned in discussion, and I think accepted as a friendly amendment, that there would be the notation that the pay ranges would be reflected in the operating budget. Am I correct?
The pay ranges are reflected in the operating budget. If you want to, I mean, you can also add that language in the next, at the next meeting when you amend, when you have the second reading.
That's true. If you could, if the council.
There actually, I'm glad you brought that. There wasn't an actual vote on that.
No, there wasn't a vote. I accept. I think I just considered that sort of a friendly amendment.
That's what I thought happened too, yeah.
And just for, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
Just for clarification, those pay ranges are not the exhibit. They were just put in the briefing material
So what
as
she,
a
what they, I
reference.
think what Andy was talking about is adding like a sentence that says pay ranges are to be included in the budget legislation.
Right,
And so-
exactly. So they weren't in the budget.
And so if you want that language, we can work up a sentence for that, that it can be an amendment at the next, when you have the public hearing and the second reading.
Okay.
If council wants to go that route. Or it doesn't need to be mentioned because it is included in here.
All right.
Well, part of the reason for that is this bill will set up pay ranges that will go on past this FY, right?
So.
The ranges.
Yeah, so, but the advantage to having it, if next year there's inflation and we want to adjust the ranges, we don't have to, the budget document, having it in there.
That's my exact point.
Right.
But so you adopt the ranges, the grades, and all that, this bill, which will have a lifespan, but the actual numbers will come up each year for enactment.
So if council so chooses, we can have a sentence for the next meeting.
Thank you. Sorry.
And I wanted to provide, in everybody's budget, or everybody's book, the first tab that says budget, that is, those would be your attachments and what would be part of the legislation for, and I'm giving you a copy that's Thank you. So that's That's the document when we're referencing budget and what gets attached and what gets adopted. That section is what ultimately gets adopted. Again, for council's information, we provide you the munis document, but the actual attachment to the budget is what is referenced in the legislation.
Yeah, we will have separate PDF files and all that.
Yes, I've now provided to Mrs. Hurley the.
Okay. Wonderful.
Did I miss it? Council voted for the.
No, they haven't voted yet.
We haven't started yet. Mr.
Okay.
I put a hold on that when we went back to 2022-05.
Okay.
Entertain a motion to introduce legislative bill number 2022-06.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of introducing legislative bill number 2022-06, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. The introduction of legislative bill number 2022-06 passes. Mrs. Hurley?
And just, again, we can have that public hearing on May the 3rd at 6 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we open the floor for public comments. If you have any public comments that you'd like to make, please come to the podium, state your name, your county of residence, and your concerns.
Yes, my name is Kimberly Groves. I reside here in Wicomico County, and I have 3 concerns. The first one is, why did we not get an adequate answer as to why the transparency bill failed? Parents deserve and absolutely deserve the right, and I think this council totally agrees that they deserve the right to see what their children are learning in these public schools in Wicomico County. The second concern, I know you're going to be addressing the Wicomico County school budget. I urge you to carefully look at each individual line item. This is a 194-page budget with all the bells and whistles that are in it, including the letters and all this legal things that need to be in here according to the state of Maryland. A lot can get lost in 194 pages, but I urge you to carefully look at each individual page, each individual line, and consider carefully what the line items mean, because things can get obfuscated. The third regards the Wicomico County budget. We are all charged, we are taxpayers, we are all taxpayers, and I encourage you all to be good stewards with our money. It's a massive responsibility that you all have, and here you are discussing raising and lowering raising people's salaries to make them competitive. However, we have departments in this county that are unfunded and underfunded and have no employees, and yet we're sitting here discussing how much we can give somebody when we need to be looking at how much we can fund these departments that have zero money. And I urge the council to take that into consideration. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is David James. I reside here in Wicomico County, and we also have, we're landlords. This thing they were talking about that they're trying to pass for landlords, from what I understand, the sheriff's office would lock the door and property would be left inside. The concern from a landlord's perspective is security. Someone can come in and bust my windows out, and I'm responsible for that because their property's inside. We really cannot hold people's things hostage. I've talked to a couple of county deputies who believe the same thing, you know. I don't know if that was actually passed, but I think I heard Mr. Adams says it's close to being passed. After that, my question is for the council, is that something that we're going to talk to the landlords locally? I mean, John, I think you're a landlord as well. I mean, I think that's something that we definitely need to talk to the landlords locally about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Any other public comments? That concludes public comments. Council comments. Larry?
Yes, this past Saturday, I was able to attend with some of my colleagues the Fruitland Little League Parade and opening day ceremonies. It was a great event. We saw a lot of dignitaries there and hundreds of kids and parents and grandparents. A lot of excitement in the air. This Saturday, East Wicomico Little League is going to have their opening day ceremonies, and we've got 5 Little Leagues. I'd love to attend all of them. On Thursday, I attended the Chamber of Commerce luncheon with the comptrollers candidates, and it was a great event, and there are 3 good candidates. They all spoke well, so I was impressed with all 3 of them. And this coming Saturday, I'll be attending the Powellville Volunteer Fire Department's annual banquet. And I do want to thank everyone that attended today's meetings, and everything that you all said, we take it to heart, so thank you.
Comments? Yes.
Well, today we passed the bill, or introduced the bill to raise employee salaries. We've been behind the 8 ball, I guess, on this for a while, losing a lot of employees to other counties and to other businesses, and with inflation the way it is. But we also, like the lady at the podium said, have to remember who's paying the bills. The reason I made the one amendment is we had one employee that was going from $70,000 to $103,000. That's a morale buster for the rest of our employees, because some of them are getting no raises, and that's something I hope we can take care of that in the budget. Maybe we can, but so that's the reason I put that amendment forward. The other amendment was about a pay grade for our council administrator that would basically limit that salary at some point in time in the future. I think she's very happy with what she's getting paid now, but it could be something in the future when we had to, if she retired or whatever, that we would have to hire somebody that would make it difficult. So I'm glad I got to vote for this today. I hope when the county executive and the finance director put their pen to it, they'll be responsible and help keep the morale of the other employees up in the county, other than just one that was going to get a $33,000 pay increase. So, thank you.
Any other council comments?
I just wanted to comment on our delegates coming today and sharing the local initiatives in the capital budget, and one that the council had sent letter of support on was the Christian shelter and what they're going to receive. They serve so many in the community and just really have a great outreach. So I'm happy to see they were able to get that passed.
Any other comments? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn so we can go into open work session.
So moved.
Second. Meeting's adjourned. First item on the open work session is Legislative Bill 2022-04, an act to establish Chapter 46, Law Enforcement Review Board of the Wicomico County Code. Mr. Andrew Illuminati is here with us, and Mr. Wilbur. Gentlemen, how are you?
Up here as well. I got my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So we are here, when we were last discussing this, following the public hearing, there was some legislation in the State House that was going to potentially postpone the enactment period for the Police Accountability Board, as well as the Administrative Charging Committee and the Trial Board. That legislation did not pass, so we're on the original timeline as originally set forth, so everything will go into effect on July 1st. So additionally, the council wanted to receive public comment, and citizen comments were compiled. I don't know specific citizen comment that the council wants to address, or if there are any amendments that council would like to make to the proposed legislation in light of the public comments. The only thing that there was a bill that passed, Senate Bill 763, that sort of changes some stuff on the trial board end, but nothing substantial, just timelines. Doesn't completely alter the entire aspect of how the trial board operates. So as a refresher, the state law effective July 1st will be that a civilian can file a complaint of officer misconduct with either the accountability board or with the law enforcement agency which employs the officer subject to the complaint. If it's filed with the accountability board has to, within 3 days, forward that to the agency that employs the officer which is subject to the complaint. The agency then conducts an investigation, turns its investigative file over to the Administrative Charging Committee. The Administrative Charging Committee reviews the investigative findings and makes decisions on whether to charge. If they elect not to charge, it's over. If they elect to charge, there is a statewide disciplinary matrix, and the ACC recommends discipline within that matrix. The officer can accept the discipline, at which time it ends. The officer can refuse. The COMAR regulations suggest that there be settlement negotiations as a possibility. The ACC can accept those settlement negotiations, at which time the officer accepts. If the matter is concluded, the ACC can reject the proposed settlement. Then it goes back to the officer. The officer can accept or decline. If the officer declines, it goes to the trial board. Following the trial board, the officer may appeal to the circuit court. And that's the process for complaints. The board is composed. The county executive is currently written. 9 citizens would be appointed. The county council would approve those 9 citizens. They would serve on the Police Accountability Board. The Police Accountability Board appoints 2 citizens to serve on the Charging Committee. Those 2 citizens are not subject to approval by the county council, but the chair of the Accountability Board also serves on the Charging Committee. That chair is selected by the county council.
What was it, one of our questions though had to do with was that the trial board regarding the criteria of that chair?
That was regarding the Accountability Board and what conditions could be. So the state law only requires that it be an individual who has the relevant experience, which is sort of a difficult term to define, given what the Accountability Board and what the chair specifically will do. So looking at
But I think there was some intention there too, to make it broad.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what they were trying to avoid was a real narrow scope. I think they wanted it to be a broad.
It ultimately comes down to what criteria fits the relevant experience. Should it be enumerated, as it currently is on page 10, to be a retired sworn law enforcement officer? Should it be somebody with certain academic credentials, or should it just be subject to the council saying, we think that's relevant experience when the county executive puts the chair's name forward for approval? That's a decision for the council to make.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of getting too far removed from what I mean, there's so many aspects to this. I mean, just to be frank, I mean, I think it's a challenge for us as a council because, it's almost item by item. It's, there's some questions, but I think the more we stay in line with the original intent, the better. That's my.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman McCain wholeheartedly on that, because you could really get tied down in the minutia of it. I don't know really where the 20 years experience comes from as far as, that requirement. I don't know how you came up with 20 years.
I would think that comes from most of your retired police officers serve 20 or 25 years. I think that's probably where that comes from.
Okay.
Probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I received an email as well where it was stressed that either with the charging committee or probably more so with the trial board, that part of the members should be required to have some type of exercises through the firearms training simulators. I thought it was a very good perspective. This is from someone who's in that industry and has been an officer in the past. And he made a very good comment. He said, I think the people who are going to make these judgments should really possibly have firsthand experience of just the timing. In other words, if there's maybe an unjustified shooting, alleged unjustified shooting, the individuals that would be reviewing this should possibly know firsthand just exactly what half a second might mean if you're faced as an officer with those type of circumstances. So I don't know if there's anything that maybe we want to implement in here. It's harmless. I don't think it creates a bias one way or the other. It's just a more measured approach that might make these individuals better decision makers. But I would leave it up to you as to how, if the council maybe wants to make that type of a change. I thought it was very
That's kind of counterintuitive, though, with what you just said about keeping it raw.
I know.
That's a very. I see your point, but that's the thing. That's a very, very narrow. We could have a lot. We could come up with a whole list of those. That's my sort of point. We go down that rabbit hole. I could think of another 10.
I thought it was a
real
good point.
Specific items.
I thought it was a good point.
I had two questions. One is, this is a lot. I'm not going to pretend I know about law enforcement because I've never been a police officer. I'm going to leave that to Mr. Councilman Davis to guide us on that. But I would like for it to be a transparent application process, whichever route we go. I think that we need to have a notification on the county website and a portal to apply for this. That's somewhat across the board with all of our boards and commissions. I think there needs to be enough public notice and allowing citizens to engage and apply for positions on this.
I sit here and wonder how hard it's going to be to find this number of individuals that's going to want to serve on these boards, because it's going to be challenging to find not just qualified people, but the people that are willing to do it. It's going to be a thankless job.
We've run into that with trying to find judicial people to
Right.
serve on this.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I see some of these citizen comments, and it said in Anne Arundel County, police accountability boards should be adequately funded and staffed. Staffing should include, but not limited to, a director, several full-time investigators. Now, we're a different size county. I know people like to compare us to Montgomery or Anne Arundel when they're wanting us to do things, but I don't think the number of our complaints come in that's going to justify several full-time investigators. But has there been any talk about funding these people?
It's part of the puzzle.
We're also going to have designated to a department, right? So it'd be designated to the law department, which you'd be, I mean, there's a fee for that if we're designating this board to you all.
What's contemplated is certainly a staff for this board.
Pardon me? I'm sorry. Can you pull your?
You both might want to.
Right. What's contemplated is staffing for these boards. And, that's new people, new positions. We hopefully will not have a lot of complaints, but we don't know.
You're liable to have more complaints when you get it all set up and running. I guess that's kind of the way that it probably worked, but maybe justifiably. I don't know. I hope not. But yeah, that's. I mean, where do you start? Where do we start?
We start now, and we build this thing out of whole cloth.
The one comment that I had a concern with, where it states that a member who fails to maintain confidentiality shall be removed immediately by the county executive. I can live with that, but I guess a question for you, gentlemen, is that do you eliminate the council from any of these type of roles? The council is involved in the role of making the appointments. Should the council be involved in the role of removal of members?
So that's a good question. I saw that throughout. As it applies to the administrative charging committee, that is proposed regulation. As it applies to the Police Accountability Board, that is something that the council could have control over. That's in D2, which is on page 8. For the other county boards, there is advice and consent, and the individuals serve at the pleasure of the county executive. So I think it maintains that conformity throughout all the boards that the county has. And only as to, I guess the maintain confidentiality and removal of the person immediately, that was something that was in the Administrative Charging Committee regulation, proposed regulation. So it was incorporated here. Obviously, if somebody's sharing information which is not yet public, it does open up the possibility for some sort of lawsuit from the individual whose information is being shared before it goes forward. And I guess one of the thoughts is by removing those individuals as quickly as possible, no additional data that's not meant to be public can be released, and that person's, however they have access to it, it's automatically terminated at that point in time. Again, what's in D1 and 2, the county executive has everyone who serves on other boards serves at the pleasure, even though there is advice and consent from the council, and those parts are also part of the regulations on the Administrative Charging Committee. And given that some individuals overlap, there are going to be individuals who serve on the Police Accountability who may serve on the Charging Committee. I think, as it's been expressed, this is a very difficult document that the legislatures gave us, and to have conformity through each section, then when somebody's making an application, they know sort of the terms and conditions for each board are the same, which I think encourages people to apply for multiple boards and to sit on multiple boards, because you're going through the same process one way or the other for 99% of it.
Okay. There is one section on the accountability board where it says that and I'm reading from your PowerPoint, not from the bill, but you state that a member can be removed with a written notice from the local governing body. The majority of the local governing body is required to remove a member. And that is the 12th page of the PowerPoint, which is referencing the Administrative Charging Committee. So that's sort of a little different than what had been stated before.
when we were referring to the accountability board as a whole. I'm not really looking for answers right now, just so that you can make a note so we can review it.
Is there a issue with, I guess, if serving the chair on page 8, D1 and 2, talking about the chair serves at the pleasure of the county executive, or pardon me, it's not the chair, pardon me, the members or the pleasure of the county executive. Is that should we, not that we really want to give ourselves more things to do or anything like that, but I kind of feel like that could be a situation where, we could have somebody who would come in as county executive and then just wipe out the committee because they were politically, not aligned. I wrote up language, Andrew, in here that is included in the comments that basically says that the county, if the county executive decides that the removal is necessary prior to the members to the end of the member's term, the county executive may immediately suspend the member until the county council confirms or denies termination with a simple majority vote, and basically giving us 30 days to do so. But I feel like that might be a way to try to prevent anything like that could be an issue in the future, where we can have a balanced member. So I did include language in there on that section.
I'd like to dovetail on Mr. Hastings' comment there. We are hearing from citizens that feel the same way.
That's noted. So the next meeting is going to be an emergency meeting on this?
It's going to be a special legislative session, and we're going to be having that on April the 26th at 5 p.m. We are under a deadline to get this adopted by the end of April in order for it to be in effect by July 1st.
So how, no one's offered an amendment yet, and I understand that there are concerns about certain parts. What can the law department do to help alleviate council's concerns so that amendments can be drafted, or what action would you like for us to take?
I'll circle back to where we kind of started with our questions regarding the chair of the Police Accountability Board. I'd like that just simply reflect the state's language of what the sheriff, I mean, the exec can certainly use, and we can certainly use in our approval process, some of those bullet points there can be certainly guidelines and goals as far as trying to select individuals, but saying it has to meet all those criteria, and getting to Joe's point as well. I mean, that can be very challenging. Just to find us, so I think that you want it to be broad, and always remember, as council people, we have to approve it. So, and those can be criteria we can look for when we approve people. But saying it has to be those kind of things, it's way too narrow.
Yeah, I think you should add, I think you add on to that to say that the first thing should be, it should either be a retired public defender, retired states, if you want to stay with retired, say retired public defender, retired state's attorney, or retired judge, or a retired sworn law enforcement officer who then fits all of the next page, those information. But I feel like we're going to have not very many applicants for a smaller county comparatively, and then that could be a problem if we were only only have to stick within one small realm. So I'd rather keep it very much limited personally to the folks who are in law enforcement who deal with this throughout their lifetime, but then also to not just say that it has to be a sworn law enforcement officer who's retired.
I suppose we have, 6 days until that next meeting. We could send you guys emails if we needed to, if we wanted to change something, and share it with the rest of the council. If anybody wanted anything changed, we could do it that way.
Yeah, this is a work session, yeah.
We're right here.
Yeah, we're here. I'd like to hear, yeah.
I'd like to circle back to my original suggestion on having it to be a transparent application process. And can you also, we received emails on the someone with a criminal background, criminal history, they should not be eliminated. Can you define criminal history? I mean, is that a registered sex offender? Is that a moving violation? Like, what does that mean?
Nonviolent, there's another.
Nonviolent?
Nonviolent, I mean, I'm
that
not
could go a
interested.
lot of different directions.
Yeah, I'm not
So
interested on going there, but I guess a definition of.
I mean, that was a suggestion
Yeah,
that someone
yeah.
put out there, and so I don't know I'm not sure what that
Yeah.
means, actually.
I mean, on page 10, right on 4, on that, going off of that, as far as who's able to be a part of this, someone who is, it says, has been convicted of or received probation for judgment for felony or misdemeanor within a sentence imprisonment for 1 year term. I don't know that you need to have misdemeanor to be able to strike somebody, or if you're not going to have, or just have like a time limit within the last 5 years they haven't been convicted. But somebody gets a traffic stop, they can't. I don't know. Is that a misdemeanor? I'm not in the.
A traffic stop's not. One cannot be in prison for a traffic.
Okay, whatever the low bar is, I feel like that's a little low for a misdemeanor, or even if you're going for a PBJ, but definitely you don't want anyone who's I don't think you want particularly a felony conviction, assuming that we can put limits on it, but I'd like to. Yeah.
If I may jump in just quickly. There's a phrase that's used a lot in this type of language, in this type of legislation that says, if you've been convicted of a felony or a crime of moral turpitude, that would eliminate traffic and all those kind of things, but lying, cheating, stealing, even if it's still a misdemeanor, would knock you off.
And that's a commonly accepted
It's used
term.
a lot.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Transparency in the application process, what do you mean by that?
I would like to see the public notified when there's an opening or when when the county executive is accepting applications. I think just generally with our boards and commissions.
Advertisement.
Yes, some type of advertisement notice.
Advertise the
A
position.
way they can apply.
Yeah.
Currently, we have it online, right?
No.
I
I mean,
thought
you
we-
can apply.
You can apply online.
Not to my knowledge. You'd have to
can't-
contact the board chair or the department that's assisting the board.
So are we talking about public hearings? Are we talking about just having it online exactly? to
I
what
think just
degree?
having it online, public notice where it's visible to the public. There's access for them to apply. It's not, you have to know someone who knows someone that can get you to the board chair.
Is that something we would implement in the bill?
I think that's easy to do.
Okay.
Yep.
What about what I had suggested that a constituent had also suggested about having some type of, making sure they go through the simulator training as far as, and I'm assuming that would be the trial board. Don't you think that would be the trial board that would be really held to that type of judgment?
I mean, I think it would be beneficial, obviously, for actually all three, because the accountability board is making a determination on
Okay, would that fall under?
what should be going on in the county
Right.
as far as policing policies. The charging committee is going through this process of determining what charges to issue. Then the trial board is ultimately sitting in judgment on something of that nature. So that's something that could be added, some sort of simulator shooting as part of all of the training. So training is being offered by the Mayor and Police Training Commission for the committee and the trial board, but not for the Police Accountability Board.
I wouldn't require it. I don't know if we want to put it in there or suggest or something to that effect. I wouldn't make it a requirement.
Well, and just keep in mind, there is an expense for that training.
It just seems a little.
It's timely. I mean, I'm not for,
You're speaking of a recommendation
Right, right.
as opposed to a
Yeah,
requirement.
Yeah, like a recommendation, recommended, something to that effect. Encourage.
It says members must complete required training set by the county executive.
So
So
that's,
I guess it would fall within that criteria.
it could be part of that process, because the Police Accountability Board is the only board that's not receiving state training at this point in time. And that may change in the future, but they have a very tall task to get the charging committee and the trial board trained up by the end of July, or
Is the required training set by the county executive, is that part of this bill, or would that be just training that the county executive comes up with?
training that the county executive comes up with. So the thought was that the Eastern Shore Criminal Justice Academy could put together a 4-hour course on what's police, that specifically addresses the Police Accountability Board's duties. And the simulator shooting could be part of that, could be part of this bill to require it, recommend it, or just be part of what the county executive puts together as part of its training.
Yeah, I think as we go along, because we know what's going to happen here, we're going to be amending this. I think that probably should be amended into this later on.
Okay.
Once we get a good feel for it.
Is there any way to rewrite that to say that we're looking for a standard course instead of something that a county executive could come up with? Because I know you mentioned that we're hoping the Criminal Justice Academy may come up with something, but it'd be nice to have it in writing.
They could read, the required training shall be set by the county executive in consultation with the Eastern Shore Criminal Justice Academy.
Based on standard operating procedures, maybe?
Okay.
To President Cannon's point, there's no doubt we'll be back to discuss this as it develops at the state level and as we have experience with it at the local level.
So we could adopt the state law and then come back and amend it.
A few times.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a long process. I think the idea here is to try to wrap this up with the extreme deadlines we've been given from the state of Maryland.
Right.
To meet that original deadline, and then the real work will probably begin after
Right.
then.
Let's hit our starting point
Yes.
deadline, and then we'll figure it out going forward.
This could be changed many times.
Are there any other
Could be.
questions?
It's going to be a trial and error, no pun intended, but.
Do you have anything else that you need from us? Do we leave you with any gray areas you need clarification on?
No, what I guess I have the portal to apply, the transparency in the application, revisiting the standards for the chair, revisiting the standards for prior criminal conduct for the accountability board, and then the training involving for the accountability board as possible amendments. And I can put together a possible amendments that would address those and where they could go based on the feedback received today. I don't have a calendar. The date is next Tuesday or next Friday?
Next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
To the 26th?
Yes, and just, for everyone's benefit, including the public, we'll be having a public hearing before the actual consideration of the bill. There's also an online portal that citizens can submit their comments, their questions, and I'll try to respond as quick as possible.
And you've done that already?
Yes, we've already received 2 comments that have come in that we've responded to. We did receive a question today that says, how about from the jury duty list? I'm assuming they're talking about getting the members. So I'll email that out to everyone so you have that. But again, it'll be a public hearing on April the 26th, and there is an online portal for comments.
Mr. Wilbur or Mr. Illuminati, we've already stated that there's going to be a cost to this. Do we have any idea what, right from the start?
I'm not aware that we've put any dollars on this. And
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I think the one sort of known is there's gonna have to be a staff member to sort of facilitate when these boards are going to meet and distribute the materials as a starting point. Outside of that, and then there's gonna be the cost associated with the judge sitting.
Right.
Outside of that, this current legislation does not pay any of the board members. There hasn't been a request today to make that amendment into this legislative bill. That's something that, depending on how much time and energy and effort this all takes, compensation may be required down the line.
investigators. And
Investigators.
like Joe mentioned, they,
And we just got the budget book, so it sounds like there may be an amendment coming up.
right. We'll try to discuss that with the executive and
Is there a
have some thoughts.
Is there a possibility of sharing investigators with other counties?
So the law enforcement agency is the agency that conducts the investigation into the misconduct.
Right.
So that's going to be a cost borne by the committee, by that actual law enforcement agency. I don't know where full-time investigators would really play a role in this process because.
Well, even the schedulers and things like that you're talking about, the administrative, whether they could be shared, I don't know if they could or not.
This may be something, John, that, and Andy brought that up, that we could possibly talk to Tri-County Council about. You know, get them involved, because each county, Somerset, Worcester, and Wicomico, is going to have the same burden, you know, and so maybe that's something that some of this could be shuttled over to them.
It's possible. I mean, if they focus on economic development more than anything else.
Well, I understand that, but they still had the connections of the three counties.
Right.
I don't mean getting them in charge of it. That's not what I'm talking about. But, you know, getting some cohesion there and resources for all of it. And they're close to Warwick, so.
I'd like to wrap it up because we have the Board of Education coming in here in about 7 minutes. Yes.
Last thing, I don't know if you both have a copy of the comments the public has received. I don't know if there's anything, I mean, personally, I would love for you to see it. It's up to the direction of the council, but I would love for you to look through it. If there's anything that stands out that other counties are doing or something that we somehow missed, scanning that could be helpful, I think. But as well as the other things on my mind was just, I don't know if any other counties have come out and said that they're paying, you know, their participants, and if so, that gives us a baseline of understanding, but that could be helpful.
We're going to take a 10-minute recess, literally 10-minute recess for lunch. We have the Board of Education coming in here in 5 minutes, and I don't want to leave them sitting out here too long.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur, Mr. Lemonade.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Let's take a quick break.
Back 14 is ready.
I was just waiting for that up there.
Having issues? I keep going in and out.
We now resume the legislative session 2022-07 for April 19, 2022 for Wicomico County Council, an open work session. The first item on the agenda is the quarterly meeting of the Wicomico County Board of Education, and everyone's here. These educating people are always on time or early. That's true. That's true.
Where's the board members?
Well, it's, as I just said to my team, it's kind of a fluky thing that each one of them had a conflict today, unfortunately, so.
Election season, you know.
Okay. If you all want to join us. Okay.
Don't come up, have a seat.
I guess primarily what we have on the agenda, what was a major concern is the upcoming budget session. And we do.
We added a few things, but mostly related to budget in one item
Okay.
for blueprint. Excuse me a second.
John, should we put this off until some board members could be here?
It kind of feels
I
a
mean,
little
seriously.
odd
I mean,
that
this is,
they're not here.
I mean, there's no board members here.
Everybody's here. I
Everybody's
think
here.
we can still have a discussion.
Administration?
We can still have a discussion. I'm sure they went to a lot of trouble to prepare this and.
Well, I understand
and
that.
the time.
They're here now.
Bounce all around. When I had print.
I'd like us to begin by introducing ourselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Donna Hanlon, Superintendent.
Mike Stoffer, Chief Finance and Operations Officer.
Jesse Reed, Comptroller.
We also have with us Dr. Rick Briggs, Chief Academic Officer, and Mrs. Kim Miles, Assistant Superintendent for Student and Family Services.
Well, thank you for being
And
here.
as I said, our board members are, unfortunately, each one had a conflict today, and so they're not able to be with us. But obviously, they know this budget very well, having approved it.
Okay, thank you. So what you have given us today, are these some changes that you're anticipating, or just a highlight of?
Highlights.
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to take you through that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Say anything, you want me to go ahead? Okay. Good afternoon, council members. I wanted to briefly highlight a few things in the budget for the benefit of the council, and I'd like to begin with our revenue, which is from page 50 of our budget. It's the top page on your handout. So our maintenance of effort county appropriation number provided by MSDE was $50.1 million, which is an increase of $1.3 million over the previous year. Our other revenue is down primarily because of low interest rates, lack of rental revenue, and not being allowed to charge for summer school any longer per the law. Our foundation revenue, which is based on total enrollment, is $86.4 million. That's an increase of $12.8 million over the current year as a result of Kerwin being fully implemented. Net taxable income is now included in the foundation revenue, so that goes away in FY23. Comp Ed is based on our free and reduced student count, and it is being flat funded because our count was down slightly. Special education appears to be up almost $2 million, but in reality it's only up slightly, which I'm going to explain in a second. Limited English proficiency is up $2.5 million because of the large growth in that population. College and career readiness is a new funding source under Kerwin, and we are receiving $439,000 for that initiative. Transportation is up about $550,000, and the guaranteed tax base, which is based on county wealth and enrollment, is down slightly. We did not receive a declining enrollment grant this year, and our teacher salary grant is down about $1.6 million because it's now based solely on our nationally board certified teachers. Transitional Supplemental Instruction, or TSI, was formerly a grant. It's now part of the general fund. Aging schools and non-public placements are not changing, so that leaves us with $14.2 million in additional state aid. We have about $3.9 million in additional fund balance left over from the previous year, and that added in with the additional county and state revenue brings the total to $18.9 million in new funding. However, that number is misleading because we are only able to compare, we're not able to compare apples to apples. $2.5 million of this funding was TSI and special ed grant funding previously, so it's not really new funding available. It already has $2.5 million in salaries applied against it, as you'll see in a minute. And that paired with the $3.3 million in additional costs just to open the doors next year brings the number down to about $13 million in new funding that we had to work with. So on the next page, which is page 58 from our budget book, you can see the breakdown of how the new funding is allocated. You can see that we have the cost of doing business of $3.3 million that I just mentioned. These are the additional costs just to open the door next year. The increases in our insurances, mainly health insurance, almost $1 million. The increase in our retirement contribution, over $1 million. increases from rising costs due to inflation and the shortage of materials, and increases in our software and hardware annual maintenance contracts. As I also just mentioned, we had $2.5 million in grants that became unrestricted, and that represents 47 positions that are moving from being grant funded to now being funded by the general fund. So no new people or positions, just changing in funding sources.
You said no new positions.
So far, the next page does have some new positions. And at the bottom of the page, you'll see I projected $600,000 in salary savings from turnover. So that's a reduction in expenses. And on the next page, this page displays our new requests. As you can see, we're having to pick up 7 positions due to the expiring pre-K expansion grant. We're adding 8 teachers, including 5 English language learning teachers. We're expanding funding for our band programs, increasing funding for some before and after school programs, and adding 4 technology staff due to the increase in devices in our growing tech environment. We're adding a CNA, 2 additional ground staff, a transportation specialist, and 2 additional custodial staff due to the expansion of alternative programs. So although we are adding 25.5 positions, 7.5 of those are a result of grants expiring that we have to pick up in the general fund. So in reality, it's more like 17, 18. And finally, we needed $10.7 million to fund our negotiated agreements, which added almost $900,000 in additional fixed charges for a total of $11.6 million. And everything on this page, in addition to everything you just saw on the previous page, comes to $18.9 million, creating a balanced budget. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I know, gosh, it was, I don't want to say 2 years ago, but it was right after COVID started. We met with you all, and I think Dr. Briggs answered the question. I asked if we were going to continue doing Zoom-type classes, and I think Dr. Briggs said yes, so it's inevitable. But I'm curious how large the IT department got. How many, do you know how many employees that they've gone up since COVID started?
We'd have to probably get that specific number back to you, but we have had some positions that have been added because we went to a one-to-one initiative. So from the time before COVID to now, we've added 6,000 or 7,000 laptops into the hands of our students and gone to a one-to-one initiative.
And my second question, I don't want to hold y'all up, but how is that working out? Because I know we're talking about kids and talking about expensive laptops. Are they destroying them by accident? Not intentionally, I know, but a lot of handling. Are we seeing a lot of repaired laptops?
There are some that we're seeing, but we make sure that the laptops that we're using are durable laptops.
Okay.
Also, much like a textbook, if there's damage to something that's caused intentionally by a student, that may be something that goes back to that student to partially pay for at some point as well.
Did they make, you said durable laptops. I know in the field for like police officers, they have something called a tough book, which is a heavy-duty laptop. It's a little more expensive, but it prevents damage. I don't know if they had that for schools.
Rick, can you answer that at all?
We are not currently utilizing anything like that.
All right. Keep your eye out for it. May be a need.
I think we're experiencing normal wear and tear.
Wear and tear. That's good. Thank you.
The ELO teachers, is it required that you have to teach those kids? Mike, that you have to teach those kids in their language? Is there any point that those kids would have to learn the English language?
They do learn the English language. They're taught by certified English language learner teachers who are experienced and have been trained in teaching students from multiple languages how to speak English. So yes, that's the goal, that they would become more proficient in English so that they can eventually make their way into regular classes.
So you're required to take them even if they don't speak English?
Absolutely.
Because we have a problem with them on the bus.
I had one little girl, she stood at the back of the bus, and I said, could you please sit down? She just stood there. And the girl said, she don't speak English. So that's a little problem with us. So it does require, that say those kids in first grade, so at what point should they be able to speak English proficient to be in a regular class?
I don't know that there's any rule of thumb. I would say that, it varies from student to student. Obviously, their academic ability in their own native language in the first place, but it will vary. I'm going to ask Dr. Briggs again, do you have any idea of a range of time?
No, there's so many factors that go into it, from the amount of English that's spoken in the home.
Dr. Briggs, you will need to come to the table.
Report to the.
She knows how to ring you in.
It may be just as easy to get Ernie to learn a foreign language instead of, right?
That'd be cheaper.
So as far as being able to evaluate it.
Yeah, it ranges for every student. Their academic ability, as Dr. Hanlon mentioned, their eagerness to want to learn the English language definitely plays a factor. And like we said, the home language. Some homes, there's no English spoken whatsoever. The only English that they're exposed to is the time that they're with us, from the second they step on the bus to the second they step off of it in the afternoon. So it really ranges. We try to speed that process up as expediently as we can.
And you receive them at all different
levels,
from high school to elementary to.
Councilman Davis, my husband came here from Cuba in the 70s, and he and his family didn't speak any English, and he failed 4th grade, and then he went on to finish college and medical school in 5 years. So who knows?
Impressive.
Awesome.
So, Dr. Briggs, do you know how many foreign languages we have in our public schools?
At 49, I believe, 49.
That's not including the dialect. Because I had a problem with them on the bus. They were Spanish. So we took them to West Salisbury with their parents. And Rick Smoke was there, and one of y'all's interpreter was there. And she was talking to their parents. Because they at the bus stop, there was 3 groups of them. They wouldn't mingle with each other. Yeah. So when they were in there talking, and the interpreter from the board was speaking to this lady, she stopped. She said, "Oh, my God." And we was like, "What's wrong?" They were getting an attitude towards her because she wasn't speaking their dialect.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know that we have 49 languages.
Is the 35% increase, and I hate to sort of like take just isolated areas because there's always more to it, but this says 35% increase in is that because there is an increase in the enrollment of those students, or are you just applying more funds towards that effort?
It's a combination, I believe. The enrollment of our English language learner population has increased, but we also added a program that will better, that's been 2 years ago, I believe, in essence is a newcomers program so students who are brand new, who don't speak any English at all, start there so they get intense services. And that's been a research-based model that's been used in other places that's been very effective. So we've had that in place, and we've needed to continue to add staff to make that work.
I got it. I understand. I also noted in here that there was a 100% reduction based on the decline in the enrollment. And again, taking these numbers as they are by themselves, I know is not always a good thing, but you have on here, I believe it's the 100% reduction, decline in enrollment grant. It's about halfway down under state. And they've reduced that by $4,800,833, and it says it's being, and is that, because I know there's an issue, isn't there an issue, and there has been an issue now, mostly due to COVID, that enrollment's gone down, and I believe you sent a letter out not too long ago trying to express your concerns to the state that decline in enrollment is maybe an anomaly to a certain degree. Where are we with that in this current reduction?
We tried to get them to enact a declining enrollment grant this year, but their argument was because Kerwin funding is now implemented and the per pupil funding is higher, and because no one's actually losing money, that they weren't going to do a declining enrollment grant, even though
No one received a declining enrollment grant.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right.
So is
This is
there
a
a
good
plan to?
example, I was just going to say, this is a good example of how Blueprint funding has increased per pupil, but at the same time, there are other funding that we have received typically in the past that are being used to subsidize that increase.
And Peter to pay Paul and all that thing.
Do you have a plan to bring those students back to the public school system? Of how to, I mean, losing so much enrollment, is there a, I don't know, family engagement or something that you can start bringing them back into the public school system?
We have been successful in bouncing back to some degree, as I've said, in other settings, but we're not back to where we were before COVID. But we continue to do outreach with families, especially out in our communities with our community liaisons.
Yes, I don't know if I'm reading this right or not. It looks like there's just a $10,000 increase in the school resource officers. And my question to that was, I know, I can't remember if it was the governor, but somebody was going to pass legislation where we were going to have to increase SROs in more of the schools, like elementary. Have we done that?
All of our SROs are assigned to elementary schools as needed. So we're in
Like a
compliance
sister
with the
school?
law.
Okay. But you don't have any full-time there yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Nor is it required by the law at this point,
Okay.
except just to be assigned.
All right, thank you for that.
Let's see, they had a 190% increase in pre-K, which I think is good. I think we've always been ahead of the curve on that. I really do. And so is this part of a local initiative, or is it just part of what the federal and the state governments are sending down at the local level?
I think everyone recognizes the importance of pre-kindergarten, and I'm really pleased with our efforts locally to increase pre-kindergarten enrollment, not only 4-year-olds, but 3-year-olds. My colleagues across the state, as they're being required to increase the enrollment more and more, are scrambling because they haven't, and I shouldn't speak generally, but in many systems, they have not considered that as much of a priority as we have here.
Very good. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you for the overview.
Yeah.
Where do have we covered budget requirements, or?
So
Yes.
we wanted to take a step back for a second, because many times we'll present the budget that we have, and you ask great questions that we're able to inform you on. But we thought it might be helpful to just take a step back and talk a little bit about how we structure our budget the way that we do, what requirements that we have to follow as a school system within Maryland, and the things that we include in our budget, and how we inform really all of you and our community as well. So we just wanted to spend a few minutes on that.
Sure, thank you.
Handed those out already, right? I think I handed those out already. Yeah, I think so. You guys have this handout, the 2022? No? Oh, it was the agenda, I'm sorry.
I don't see it.
I apologize.
What you can do, just give it to Larry, and he'll just
I'll be glad.
pass
Just give it to me
through.
and I'll pass it
He'll just
around.
pass it down.
You can go ahead and start if you want.
Sure.
Just give it to me, I'll hand it to everybody.
Just pass them on down, Larry.
So we prepare our budget in accordance with Maryland Education Code 5-101. It spells out the order that the funds and categories should be displayed. And I'm not going to read every line, but you can see that we're to budget the number of full-time equivalent positions by each category and any fund balances held by an outside source. On page 2, you can see that we are to show the current expense fund estimated receipts as part 1 of our budget. The current expense fund is made up of our general fund, to which the county contributes funding, and our state and federal grants.
All right, let me do you a favor. Let me ask you to start all that over.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
You were on page 3 before we got down to the end. If you could, thank
No
you.
problem.
We're ready.
So we prepare our budget in accordance with Maryland Education Code 5-101, which is what you have a copy of in front of you. It spells out the order that the funds and categories should be displayed. And I'm not going to read every line, but as you can see, We are to budget the number of full-time equivalent positions by each category and any fund balances held by an outside source. On page 2, you can see that we are to show the current expense fund estimated receipts as part 1 of our budget. The current expense fund is made up of our general fund, to which the county contributes funding, and our state and federal grants. We have to display our budget by the 14 major categories, which are administration, mid-level administration, instructional salaries, textbooks and supplies, other instructional costs, special ed, student personnel, health, student transportation, operation of plant, maintenance, fixed charges, food service, and capital outlay. And following part 1 of our budget, part 2 of the budget is to be the school construction fund, where we have to display our requested appropriation from the capital plan, or capital appropriation by land, buildings and equipment, site improvement, remodeling, additional equipment, and debt service. And we actually display a lot of additional information that isn't required by law. We do this for 2 reasons. One is because we follow the format recommended by the Maryland Association of School Business Officials, so we can ensure that we are producing a budget document that is held to their standards and similar to other Maryland counties. And 2, we want it to be a document that you can go to access just about everything you might want to know about the school system. So we include an executive summary of who we are, enrollment numbers by school, projected enrollment for the future, projected expenses and revenue, salary scales for employees, and how we compare against other counties in various categories across the state, just to list a few examples. Again, these aren't required, just additional information we like to provide. And the budget document that we produce in March is not as thorough as the document we provide in June, because we don't have all the statistics and supplementary information by March. So it goes from about a 194-page document in March to a 260-page document in June. So if you really want to get the full details of what we have going on, read the one we post in June after final approval. Okay. Did anyone have any questions about how we?
Jesse, this is extremely helpful, and I don't know if you can put this on your website, because I've gotten so many questions over the past month that the reason teachers do not get a raise is because of the tax cap. And so it really clarifies that point in a nice, clear, concise way. So
that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great idea.
Explain that, Nicole. Why the teachers didn't get a raise because of the tax cap.
That is the misconception.
Huh?
She said that was a myth.
Oh,
The
yeah.
misconception.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought you were.
Oh, trust me, Joe, I wouldn't say that in front of you.
Question.
But it's the misconception that I think just needs to be cleared up.
That's the evil of all, the tax cap.
That's correct. I'm glad you figured that out.
Bill, stop.
I second that.
Any other questions? Maintenance of effort versus local share, right? Maintenance of effort is still around.
It is. I was going to try and explain maintenance of effort going forward, because things are going to be changing. So FY23 is the final year of the maintenance of effort kicker. You may recall that if a county government's education effort was below the statewide average, there was an escalator that kicked in, requiring a county to contribute additional funding. So starting in FY24 and going forward, county funding will be based on the higher of the new maintenance of effort, which is again without the kicker, or what the state is calling local share. The new maintenance of effort is simply going to be what we are slated to receive from the county in the current year, divided by last year's enrollment times the current year's enrollment. So because there is no longer a kicker, the per pupil maintenance of effort funding will always be the same every year. Local share is going to be based on 8 different funding sources, which are total enrollment, county wealth, college and career readiness students, free and reduced meal students, English language learning students, special ed students, students requiring supplemental instruction, and pre-K students. And again, going forward, it's going to be the higher of the new maintenance of effort without the kicker, or the local share, which is the 8 separate allocations based on the items I just listed.
You said it's not going to change maintenance of effort.
It's going to go down.
It'll go down.
For us, because every year we've had the kicker.
Okay, but just sounds like the formula has changed.
Yeah, the formula's changed in the sense that now it's the greater of the new maintenance of effort without the kicker, or this local share, which is based on those 8 different items. And so,
But we still have to fund a budget.
correct. One of the two is going to be required,
Right.
either maintenance of effort or local share.
Okay. The blueprint timeline?
We'll see.
I'm gonna go down there and give them some and do it this way.
Is that by coincidence? It's in blue?
So you don't forget the
Yeah.
title. No, I know. So in front of you, I think by now you should have it, this is called the proposed new plan timeline for the blueprint plan. That has since, this was published back in February, that has since been approved by the General Assembly at the conclusion of this legislative session, just I guess it was early last week. And it kind of outlines the new proposed timeline of where we are. If you remember, the Accountability and Implementation Board is the Maryland governmental department that will be in charge of implementing the blueprint statewide. That department was late in getting started. Governor Hogan was to nominate members for the AIB, and that was to be done by July of this past summer. That didn't occur until the fall. The Blueprint AIB committee didn't meet until around Thanksgiving, and then really didn't get started with staff until an executive director was chosen just 2 months ago. And then they'll be starting to staff that department between now and the end of June. So hopefully they'll be in a position where they can really get started on the work that they need to do. So the entire timeline for Blueprint really has been pushed back by about 9 to 10 months statewide. So if you look at this new proposed timeline, some key dates that stand out will be December 1st. The AIB adopts the Comprehensive Implementation Plan. That will be a statewide plan that all 24 local school systems have to follow in order to develop the local implementation plan. So Wicomico County will have its own blueprint implementation plan that is developed, and that has to be submitted to the state now March 15th, 2023. That original deadline was June 15th, in just a couple of months. So the next step for Wicomico will be that we'll be developing work groups specifically around the 5 pillars or 5 policy areas of Blueprint itself: the expansion of pre-K or early childhood education, college and career readiness, including CTE, the career ladder or high-quality instructional staff, as well as ensuring that we have resources for our populations of students that are struggling or need those additional resources to be successful, which includes our English language learners or special education students. So there's be more funding available to help push those students forward, and then also governance and accountability, both at the state level and the local level. So we'll be getting those work groups together over the course of the next few months. MSDE will be taking a guiding role, even though the Accountability and Implementation Board will serve as the overarching accountability piece for Blueprint. MSDE will be working alongside them and the local school systems to provide guidance to each school system as they develop these implementation plans. So that'll begin this summer and into the fall, and that's when really you'll see the work start to, the pen will be put to the paper over the course of the next 6 months or so as each school system's developing their plan. Any questions?
So Are you then accountable to this board or to your elected board? Because it seems a little strange to have an appointed board when you have an elected school board.
So first, something like our local blueprint implementation plan will first be approved by our local board. They will be a key piece in developing that. That plan would then be submitted to both MSDE and then ultimately the AIB, or Accountability and Implementation Board, will be the ones approving that plan.
First step will be your elected board.
That's right.
That's what's due by March 15th?
March 15th is what's due. It's due to the AIB. So it has to be, the local plans have to be submitted at a state level. So obviously, if we work backwards, we'll be working with our local boards earlier than that.
And you might have said this, who appoints the AIB?
So the AIB, there was a nominating committee that was first formed by the governor. That nominating committee then chose to put a number, I think it was around 12 names forward, and then ultimately the AIB was selected by the governor and also the General Assembly.
Together, is it something you'll be able to do locally?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And we will have stakeholders from not only Wicomico County Public Schools, but also the community as well, as it needs to apply to each of those areas.
And one of those categories you discussed, one of them was recruitment and retention, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
It's very well aligned. Those pillars are very well aligned with the strategic plan that's already in place.
Isn't that the truth? Any questions? Okay.
I have one more item, if you have time, that may be of interest to you. I know that there is a lot of controversy in the community about books and media materials in our media centers, and I thought that I would just speak to that for a moment and tell you how we make decisions about selecting materials as well as reviewing materials when parents express concern. Obviously, I'm sure just even on the county council, even on our board, people sitting in this room, the opinions about this topic are extremely wide, from those who believe that it should be very limited, what students have access to in our schools, as well as the other end of the spectrum. And we hear from those individuals as well who believe that there's no place for banning or censorship of materials, as it could be considered a First Amendment violation in our schools. So we have a policy and a procedure in place for the selection of textbooks and media materials, and also the review of those materials. And I have for you, killed a few trees for you today, a copy of the policy, which is the board's policy, and then, as you'll note, if you've looked at our policies, you'll see that the board creates a policy which basically is their belief about what should govern our schools or how our schools should be governed, and then they direct the superintendent to create procedures, which is the administrative procedure. It's like the law and regulation at the state level. So the policy is on top. It's short. It just describes what the board believes, that we should provide students with a comprehensive selection of materials and textbooks that support curricular goals and objectives and reflects their varied interests, abilities, and maturity levels for the divergent student population that it serves. And I'll let you read that for yourself. I won't read the whole thing to you, but it also indicates that those materials should be in support of our mission, vision, educational philosophy, beliefs, and values. Then what you have next, which is much more detailed, is the procedure. And it specifies, in addition to a handbook that our media specialists have, it specifies how materials are selected It talks about that they are selected by our media specialists. We have a certified library media specialist in each one of our schools. And they select and order these materials. And they examine them for relevance to the curriculum, objectives of instructional programs, accuracy of content, appropriateness of reading level, quality of literary content and technical merit, and robustness of review by external scholars and professionals. The procedure also goes on to say that it should provide, that the collection should provide a global perspective in order to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. It should offer a broad background of information, including opposing sides of controversial issues, to foster critical thinking of students, and that purchases come through the media specialists, are approved by supervisor and by the director of curriculum. The next section is the handling of concerns, and I'm just talking today specifically about the media center material. That's really where the concerns of late have come from. So, very step-by-step process there. In the event that a parent or a guardian has a concern about a resource in the media center, they should they should communicate their concerns to the school principal. Then the school principal would meet with that individual. It's sort of like an appeal process through this procedure. If the concern is not resolved at the school level, then it comes to the chief academic officer, and the chief academic officer then appoints a committee that's specific to review that material. So it's not a standing committee. It is a committee that's assigned to review the specific material that is of concern. The committee will then will read the materials in their entirety and discuss the material, and then provide a recommendation to the superintendent of schools. The superintendent of schools determines whether he or she is going to adopt the recommendation and then communicates back to the concerned citizen. So I'll give you some examples of how this procedure has played out over the course of the last couple of years, or actually since I've been in my position for the last 6 years. There have been 4 books that concerns, excuse me, that concerns have arisen from. 3 of the books were probably at least a year ago, were a concern expressed by a parent. While the parent didn't put his concerns in writing, we did follow the procedure to determine, and at the end of the procedure, it was determined that the books would remain in our media center. Those concerns weren't raised at the school level, so the committee was formed by Dr. Briggs, and they forwarded their recommendation for those 3 books. And basically, without going through those 3 books with you, they basically found that while there may have been segments of the book that were of concern, that the literary value of the book in its entirety was of greater value than the concern. And so the recommendation from those 3 books was that, for those 3 books, was that it remain, that they remain in our media center where students have access to those books. The parent was issued a letter with my findings with the procedure for how to appeal. The parent did not appeal, so it did not come before the board. It would have been interesting to have seen what would have happened before the board, because I know that there's very wide-ranging views on our board about this particular topic. The most recent book that has been raised as a concern, All Boys Aren't Blue. When our media, this book was found, a single copy of the book was found in 2 of our high school media centers. When those 2 media specialists who ordered the book in the first place heard of the concerns that were raised at 2 other local board meetings, Somerset and Worcester, those 2 media specialists reviewed those books more thoroughly and determined that they wanted to remove them from the collection. They ordered the books, they changed their minds that those books were not appropriate, or they did not believe that those books should be in our media centers. So it did not go through the formal process of the procedure. However, I've heard from opposing views about censorship, and in talking with legal counsel, the way that we reacted to those books, according to legal counsel, could also have been considered that it was resolved at the school level. So the concern was brought, or was found at the school level, was resolved at the school level. So that's how the procedure works. Those books, I know the question has been raised, well, how'd that book get there in the first place? Our media specialists are charged. They cannot read all the hundreds of books that they order. They can't read them all themselves, but they are required to have at least 2 scholarly reviews of those books. And this particular book has been highly acclaimed. It is a book that is considered a good read for young people. So they did their due diligence in the beginning by having those required scholarly reviews. Then upon more thorough review, they chose to remove it from their collections. So
When did this procedure or process about the media specialist start? Is that the way it's always been done, or
they ordered the books, and
they order the books, then they're
as far as I know, as
because
far
about
back as I remember.
it's been about 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, we had a book that came forward. A parent brought it to me. Basically, it was pornography. I mean, but I was told at that time that there was a committee that approved all the books that went into the media center.
For that, Mr. Holloway, it could be that the procedure was written at that time, but I'm not sure.
I guess my other comment would be, when you say you take I'll go back, you said that more of the material in the book was beneficiary than what little bit wasn't. I mean, so you take a 200-page book, 190 pages of it is perfectly fine, but you got really 10 pages of bad stuff. Does that mean you leave the book in there?
It's on the review of the committee.
Yeah.
I was going to bring this subject up, but your narrative is very different than what I heard at the board meetings, and there were significantly more books than 3. But, we'll go with that. I just want to, put this out there. These are minors, right? I mean, you have to be 18 to buy pornography in the Royal Farms, and this is in the hands of minors.
Send it on the clerk.
So I'm just saying that these are minor. I mean, we were talking about freedom of speech. You're talking about appropriateness and defining those terms. It's in the context of children under the age of 18 that are being exposed to it. So you do have to be a certain age to purchase pornography, which is the last book that I read that was in the library, I think is worse than some of the pornography I've seen from a distance at the Royal Farms. So
I'm glad Back at the time Mr. Holloway was talking about, there were committees that were put together to review books, and then they would come to the Board of Ed, and they would have work sessions, and then ultimately the book was approved or denied.
Every book that's in the media center, or are you talking about
But
textbooks?
just new books.
And that does happen.
Right.
Textbooks go through,
Right.
and that's in that procedure, go through that review.
Yes.
With a first and second read by the board.
Yes.
I was going to say, I'm glad we have a process and it's well laid out here. It's hard to imagine that folks having problem with something in a book when, if maybe they didn't know that the internet was invented, but, that's the real place you're going to find the issues. It's all of those, the YouTube and the, whatever, all social media videos. Those are that's the real world that's out there. And of course, you can't protect everyone from all that, but I'm glad that we're at least have a process in place that we can point to, and hopefully, in the future, if there is something bad, people are getting it through reading and not through the real avenues that exist in today's society.
So Josh, are you saying that the school should be distributing this stuff?
I thought this is great that they have a process. This is the way it should go.
No, I'm not talking about the process. I'm talking about the material.
I'm saying children have phones. Yes, children.
My children don't watch that. I don't
And-
allow them to watch that on YouTube.
My children didn't.
Phones or anywhere.
Well, regardless, the internet exists. And on the internet, there are things that are uncomfortable. And so I'm glad people are having issues with reading, but we need more kids reading, not more kids, doing the other opposite. So I'm glad there's a process, but the reality is that the offensive world is something that the Board of Education can't do anything about.
They can do something about what they control.
Correct.
We'll have this conversation after you have children.
And I understand that some things slip through the cracks, but they're ultimately corrected when somebody finds out about it and complaints are made.
All right. On a lighter note, Beaver Run. We'll get off that subject. How's things going there?
Very well. On schedule, ahead of schedule, and on budget, under budget.
We are on, as we like to say, we are on budget and on schedule. So our next step will be to, at the end of the school year, move staff over from the old school to the new school. We'll be working over the summer to finalize that move and get all of the classrooms prepared for the first day of school, which will be in the new building this fall.
Have a ribbon cutting or?
Well,
No.
there's no date yet, but you will definitely be included, obviously,
Yeah.
on that.
That's right down the road from where my store is, and it's in my district, and I've had people, guess what their request is? They want bricks
Oh, they want bricks.
from the old school. So who do we see about the council, not the council, but the school board?
Take that note and
we'll-
see what we can do to get some information together.
Okay, all right. I know that's going to have to be worked out with the demolition,
Might be able to sell them.
No, yeah. Sell them, give them away. I mean, I'm sure they'd pay something for them, but I've had numerous requests I say numerous, half a dozen or so
Former
requests.
students.
Yeah, people, alumni of Beaver Run that want bricks. so.
Also keep in mind, and that's, as Dr. Hanlon said, the ribbon cutting ceremony will be yet to be scheduled, depending on how that work goes over the summer. We have extensive demolition work of the new school that we'll have to take care of after we move everyone, of the old school, I'm sorry, after we move everyone over to the new school.
Sounds good. On another note, I know we got Mordella that we're working on. The other question has come about, what's the next new school
That's what I was going to ask.
in the plans, other than roofs and repairs? I'm just talking about new school.
Fruitland Primary, I believe.
Next school we'll be looking at is Fruitland Primary and what type of renovation and work we can do there. It'll be, as we move forward, depending on how state funding occurs through the IAC and what that flat funding amount will be, that'll determine the direction that we have to go with our schools. We're looking in the future of being at a point where we can do some pretty major systemic and renovation work, potentially as opposed to new sites and new
sites, yeah.
schools.
Fruitland Primary does need some attention, and there will be a lot of happy people.
Well, Beaver Run went pretty smoothly, didn't it, compared to some of the other issues we've had in the past?
Big project, too.
Well, again, thank you all for being here. This is April 19th, of course. Your last day is June 30th, correct? So this is your last quarterly meeting. So we appreciate your leadership. You've had I think you've been demonstrated that you've been very fair, that you've had excellent judgment in your process throughout the years of what you've contributed. And I only hope that in the search that we can find someone who's as qualified as you were and as much of a visionary as you've demonstrated yourself to be over the last few years. COVID threw a real chink in the armor, and we all attended all those meetings that you had, with your what was it, Imagine 2022 and all that stuff, and and everything, as you said here, and it was so true, what is now being proposed on federal level, on the state level, Wicomico County was way ahead of the curve. And a lot of that, most of that had to do with what your vision was for Wicomico County. And we appreciate that. And again, I just hope that, and I'm sure we will, but I hope that the committee can find as qualified an individual to continue the work that you've done. And once we get back to a sense of normalcy, we can move forward as well as we were in 2019, just before everything else hit.
Do we plan on having another meeting with the superintendent and staff as well as the board before she departs?
That's what he just said, no.
Well, I know that's what we were discussing, but I didn't know if we were coming up with a definite date.
We already lost the entire Board of Education.
One sent me an email, and I wanted to say, well, where are you?
So, but again, yes, Bill.
No, I'll just say with that said, I think a little bit of applause from us is pretty worthy. Thank you. It's the least we can do.
Appreciate the support that I have felt from council members. It's been a good 6 years.
Very good.
Challenging the last 2, but.
Very much so.
Well, your name is in the
Staff.
history books.
Yeah, their staff, I think, also is very, very strong staff.
I have a great team.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. See you at the next meeting.
I saw, and Dr. Stauffer and I made a drive through there just the other day.
Actually made a few calls.
Send him to driver's ed. Thank you for checking on them bricks, too. Yeah. Okay.
It was a good idea, Joe.
The next item we have on the agenda is the proposed tax credit for disabled public servants, for lack of better words, I guess. I think from what, Andy, I know that you had put together, I think, a pretty concise idea of what the legislative bill should look like. I think the council members have had a chance to read it. I guess the two concerns that were expressed, one was that it be a local bill, which I think
The way it was submitted in the brief book is.
You're right, I think you've addressed that. The one issue that was sort of left open to council members on to how they might decide to fine tune this was the amount of the actual tax deduction, whether it's going to be 100%, or whether it's going to be a smaller percentage, whether it was going to be a flat cap rate. So that is really up for discussion, I guess. And among anything else, any other questions the council members might have.
I think that one other issue that came up was that one section where the activities that were covered remove the injury during maintenance, things like that. I got the exact word. And then that we had the fire chief that was killed recently, something of that nature. We had taken that out.
What section was that, Andy?
Yeah.
What section was that?
There's a list, I'm looking for it now, where it lists all the activities that were covered for the volunteer fire companies. And the statute that they were taken from lists one more. Where it is. Just read it. We took.
So, Mr. Mitchell, could we just have it as defined by the state statute?
No, we don't. It's the activities are found in Public Safety 7202A, 3, and I believe there's 7 or so of them, and one of them we took out. And the one we took out said, while performing other duties necessary for the operation or maintenance of the fire company. We took that out because it wasn't an active, but now we've seen it. Although it may not be an active fire, it's still something that's necessary. It's still a duty being performed for the fire company. So that was the one that was brought up in the meeting, and it wasn't resolved as well.
Wasn't resolved, is that what you said? Was not?
You all didn't decide.
You did what?
See, I
don't remember the discussion.
That's one of the differences in the RNet version and the one that was used for the version put forward to the council. Was in RNet, they just cite the statute. But that statute's dealing with disabilities on a workman's comp basis. And it has extra language in there that doesn't really apply. What we did was we just lifted the language of the various activities that would be covered and just put it in the bill rather than citing the statute. But in doing that, we took one out. And that's the question, do you want to put it back in?
I'm confused.
So we took one of those out, but there's actually been an instance where a fire chief
In Delaware.
that this happened to. So we probably want to put that back in.
What was taken out?
He's saying that it has to be an act of performance duties.
That-
on duty.
Yes.
Yeah, that was.
And there
that
was a
the
fire
whole
chief that
thing.
passed away doing that.
Right, but see, the thing is, if we use the statute for the police officers and for the paid firemen and rescue workers, because they're working, they're on duty, it's pretty much following what would be workers' comp for them. But for volunteers, there's a difference, you know, because they're not on duty like 9 to 5 or whatever the hours are. So you have to sort of separate what's really a part of the duty and what isn't. And in going through that, I was asked to take that one section out because that's sort of a regular, you know, maintenance thing that's going on all the time. But then again, we saw somebody die doing that, so.
What section was taken out? What was the verbiage of this section taken?
Yeah, that's what I just read. The section that was taken out said, it would cover a volunteer while performing other duties necessary to the operation or maintenance of the fire company. And I would think that you would add to that,
What's wrong with that, though? I mean, that is what they're doing. They're working.
Yeah, but that's taken out.
Why? I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't either.
I was asked to take it out.
Who
It was-
asked you?
It was in the original.
Who asked you to take it out?
John.
John did, okay.
I think maybe it was just.
No, I did not ask you to take that out. I didn't ask you to take that out. Because I don't understand why you took it out.
That was my understanding, that I was asked to specifically take that out.
You said take it out?
Maybe I misunderstood.
Because that's what the whole law is supposed to be about, someone that's injured on the job.
Right, but see, the other things are specific. They are traveling to, performing at, returning from a fire or rescue. They're very specific to the duty, and this is the catch-all phrase that they put in the statute to pick up the other things that might be covered. I mean, I don't.
Do me a favor, read it again, if you don't mind. I don't think it's funny. I'm trying to get a
Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I didn't get it firsthand from you. While performing other duties necessary to the operation or maintenance of the fire company.
I think the
Where is that, Andy? Because I'm jumping on around here trying to.
I am too.
Yeah, the conversation I recall is if the person was a volunteer and they had a heart attack while sweeping the front steps, maybe.
Right.
But this specific incident was a volunteer fire chief in Delaware that was on a ladder. He fell off. He was doing station duties, hit his head on the bumper, and one of the fire engines ultimately died.
You know, most of the time, anybody that's on that fire department property is doing something for the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Whether it is sweeping the front steps, whether they have a heart attack or somebody backs a fire truck and injures them or something like that. I mean, it can be different things. So I'm not so sure that that's not something we should leave in there. I don't know, John. What do you think? I mean,
You think
Say we should or should not?
Should.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the volunteers maintain their own stations.
Well, for clarity, if say someone is on their way to a fire and they have a heart attack, and they die from it, are they entitled? That was not as cause of the fire? It was not.
Yeah.
It's considered a line of duty death.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the key phrase, and it's a workers' comp phrase, is arising out of and in the course of.
Yeah.
So, if you're working someplace and you decide to make a telephone call, it's got nothing to do with your job, it doesn't arise out of your job, it's not in the course of the job, and you step in something and get hurt, that's not covered. But if you're going to a meeting of fire chiefs or something and you're coming back from Elkton and you're in an accident, that would be covered. If on the way back you decide you're going to stop off and see your cousin in Smyrna or something, that's not going to be covered until you get back on your course home.
So if we're at the Hebron Volunteer Casino Night, usually held in the second.
Or their carnivals.
And individual has a heart attack in the middle of that, are they qualify?
I would think that would be not considered because they weren't responding to a fire or coming back from a call.
They were in service at that point in time.
Right. I don't know how that one would be judged. That would be an interesting question.
Is there like more simple language we could just say while in the, I guess what I'm hearing is that we don't always, obviously the folks who are, especially if you're a volunteer capacity, you're not recording your hours completely. And that's the kind of the challenge, right? It's because it starts to get a little murky as to when you're really volunteering and when you're not per se.
Well,
but
some of that, and like I said, the paid and the paid, the law enforcement, all that, even the state law, theirs is
a little more cut and dry.
It cites a different section.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking for the exact language, but I think part of the reason that was done in the state law was because, I live 200 yards from the fire station in Allen. There are a lot of guys that go up there every Saturday morning, hey, just see what's going on. And they may end up staying and doing some work around the place, they may not.
They could be logging hours as being on duty to count for
Exactly.
their Maryland credits.
Exactly. So there may be 6 of them up there that are doing that, and 2 guys say, hey, Jim's car is up there, let's see what he's doing, and they stop by, and then they don't stay. They may stay and do some work. So it's a different sort of thing than when you're being paid.
Mm-hmm. The course of employment, in the version that we have, it still refers to in the course of employment.
Yeah, but that's for the paid. Let me see if I can find it. See, it runs, and that's one of the changes was made to make these, let's see. See, it's got, I'm looking at the version that I think is the one in the briefing book, at 3.1i. It's law enforcement officer, and it cites a section. Rescue worker, and it cites a section. But it says, employed by a fire company, etc. Including members of volunteer rescue emergency unit, says, while performing the activities set below.
Where are you?
This is page 2 of the version, I believe, is the one that was submitted. And that lists, while actively participating in fighting fire, going to or from a fire. And see, number 3 in the version I have is redlined, and it struck number 3, which said, while performing other duties necessary to operation maintenance. And it has a new number 3, while actively participating in emergency medical service, worker, advanced life support, or volunteer fire ambulance or rescue company located acting alone or at the direction of or with a fire ambulance rescue advanced support unit.
Yeah, it seems like I get confused when some of this appears to be, in 4, you're talking about
disabled
employment, and yet it seems like we're it's like we transpose between someone who's employed or someone who's volunteer, because number 3 talks about a member of a volunteer fire company.
In 3.2i's, it sets out, if the first part up to where it cites a section, those are all people employed by. And then it says, and shall include members of a volunteer rescue, emergency, medical, while performing the following. So it separates. In other words, so if you're employed, you don't have to prove what you were doing, as long as you're in the course of and arising out of your job. Actually, it doesn't even require that. That's a little bit more, but the second section, just because they have differences. I mean, I would think you could certainly argue that if you're doing a chicken barbecue to raise money to keep the firehouse going, that may be part of your activities. Other people may say no.
You know, I mean, does that meet the intention of this bill, where it talks about, putting themselves in dangerous situations? So it says right in the beginning, that's that's what you're trying to compensate them for.
Right.
So,
I understand that. And that's why I really think that's why the state law doesn't tie it to the state and doesn't tie it to the county. I think they're saying if it's akin to being a veteran or something. If you've been doing this some other place and you've been injured, then, we would like to extend this credit to you. It doesn't, but see, part of it is unlike a veteran, it doesn't put any time frame. How long you've been doing it or anything like that, or where. So when I took the basic and made the changes, and it was changed several times, the big deal was to make it, the biggest thing was to make it Wicomico County centric. And it doesn't, you could be living in Princess Anne and working full-time for an entity out of Wicomico when you get injured. The weird thing is the way the state law, the enabling legislation is written. If you're killed on the job, it's right then. But if you're disabled, it doesn't kick in until you've been adjudicated disabled, which means you could be living someplace else and move here, and 18 months later, or sometime that 18-month period it took to get to court and get adjudicated, you're now a Wicomico resident. So somebody's been, working their entire career in Montgomery County is now down here getting a tax break. And if the county wants to do that, that's perfectly fine. You're rewarding somebody who's done something, good. But that's the question, if that's the intent or not.
So it seems that this bill does reflect what you call the Wicomico-centric portion, okay?
Yeah.
It does that. Now, the second part here, as far as the degree of employment, whether the person is actually, engaged in any type of EMS or firefighting job, or whether they are at a chicken barbecue or something like that.
I think that's why that section was removed, because it wasn't actively participating. But then you see, like, they can't really actively participate if they spend, 8 hours on the fire. They got to spend a lot of time cleaning all that stuff up so they can use it the next time. So,
So if we put that section back in, where does it go back? Where would it go back in, Andy?
It would go back in.
Well, if you put it back in, though, but it can't have the same language. We're right back to where we
seems almost
started.
It seems almost redundant with what we already have.
It's just a more of a catch-all. It would go in that list at 3, 2 little i's. Right now it goes 1 through 4. It would then go 1 through 5. That list is basically the same list that's cited for the professionals at 7.101B. But because it has additional language, because that section is really dealing with workers' compensation, so it has additional language in there that may or may not really truly apply here. We just listed those activities, but it's the same activities are listed with that one exception for the paid.
All right, well, just for to appease me, would you read it again? Because the council's going to need to make a decision as to whether they put that back in or they leave it as is.
What it says is, it cites for the paid people, it cites the code section, and then it says, and shall include members of a voluntary fire, rescue, or emergency medical service company located in Wicomico County performing the following activities as set out below. And then it says, actively participating in fighting a fire.
Which is in here.
Right. While going to or from a fire.
Okay.
What we took out is while performing other duties necessary to the operation or maintenance of the fire company, while actively participating in emergency medical service unit rescue work with volunteer advance support volunteer fire ambulance rescue company located in or while providing emergency rescue service, whether active alone or at the direction of or with a fire ambulance rescue company or advanced life support. I guess that's a provision that somebody that's trained shows up and is a true volunteer, even more so he's not volunteering with a company, he might be the only person there.
Well, you take a firefighter or EMT riding down the road going to work and they come upon an accident.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You know, so, you know, they stop and render aid until
somebody else
gets there.
And they're covered.
And they're covered.
So I think that's why it sounds like it's the same thing. But
So what you just read, that last part, can that be found anywhere else in the document, or does that need to be added back?
the one I said we took out?
Yes.
It would have to be added back.
Okay.
And it would
Add it back in, John, being you
see
took it
how
out.
it's written.
It's okay, it's okay with me.
See, it was originally in there, we took it out.
What about is it okay, right? Is it okay with you guys?
What's that?
To put that back in?
Oh, yeah, it's fine with me to put it back in. Larry, you want to put it
okay.
back?
I'm
Marty?
okay.
We good? Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm okay, but I still come back to that question where they talk about, well, what if somebody's at the carnival and, yeah, they have a heart attack?
They're a they're performing the duties of.
See, but that's not what this law was intended for. I mean, it was, performing it says, talks about, putting themselves in dangerous situations on a daily basis as a first responder. You're stopping at that accident, like you talked about, yeah, that's, they're doing their duty, they're in a dangerous situation, voluntarily helping to raise funds or whatever, well, then that's not.
4-year-old on a tilt-a-whirl, that could be pretty dangerous.
That's not, but now you're not performing first responder duties.
That wording, if they were paid, if they're working, as a paid EMT or what have you, and some of the volunteer ambulance companies or fire companies are paying EMTs. I don't know how that fits into it.
I guess that's.
I think we're okay on
I
that
think what
part.
Bill's suggesting is that, like, if somebody's working at the carnival and he's in charge of the ball drop and he has a heart attack, do we qualify that as someone who is injured on the job and permanently disabled and should be compensated?
Because of that language that we just put
But
back in.
what I'm saying is, if they were a volunteer, they'd be under this language. If they were paid, that same exact wording is in the statute that's cited. See, they would then be filing workers' comp claim.
We're worried about I think the volunteers, what our focus needs to be on. And the piece that was taken out was relevant to a volunteer specifically, right?
Right.
So that's the question is, do we feel it's something where you're going to give them that type of compensation if they weren't necessarily fighting a fire or, assisting someone? They just happened to be helping out somewhere and they had a heart attack, which maybe wasn't job related at all.
It could be numerous things happen to somebody not job related, even if they were on the job. I mean, it could be something that, you know, you could have a heart attack if they were on the job.
Right, and if they have it on
So
the job, hey, it's there.
Yeah, but that's counterintuitive. They were on the job. I mean, what you
Yeah.
just said, it make you,
Right.
you just conflicted your.
So we gotta make a decision whether we're gonna cover it.
When they're raising money to make sure that the fire department is in service, I think that's on the job. I think that they're doing
Well,
their
that's not what the
duty.
law was written for.
Well, that's something we need to decide.
We can change the law. That's what we do. I mean, we can change the wording of the heading of the,
We got this.
That doesn't make any
sense.
The state gave us approval to be able to do this, right?
Right.
Yes.
So if we only have an ability to do this out of what they've given us approval to do.
so what, did they give us approval to do it that way?
I don't know that they did.
That's Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah.
I
Did the state give us
Saying that we can.
approval to do it that way? To put that back in?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
But I'm reading on see, that's just a definition of who the people are. When you get down to who's disabled, when it revisits this language, it says a member of a volunteer fire company or volunteer rescue squad located in Wicomico who's
You
disabled.
talk, your little red light's not coming on. You need to talk to it. Well, I mean, so the public can hear.
No, I understand.
Joe's an expert on that now.
Whose disability, this is for someone that's disabled, whose disability arose out of and in the course of, and then it goes through this. It has those same listed items, except they're A's and B's instead of 1s and 2s. So the beginning is just defining, because the statute, the streamlined ordinance just says, it's one of those things that lawyers hate. They define a law enforcement officer by calling him a law enforcement officer. They just say, a law enforcement officer is a law enforcement officer who is disabled. Well, that doesn't tell you who a law enforcement officer is. And that's the same thing here. So that first section is just saying who is covered, and then this section 4 is saying for what they're covered. And they're covered, but it's got the same exact list of items. So if you put it back in there.
So let's, so we don't lose sight of like the big picture of this bill, it's really a thank you for doing this service, right? It's a thank you for those who do this type of service. And I think just going down to the percentage that we want to determine, that's probably where we need to focus at, of how we want that to read. If it's 100%, 50%, I think that's going to be the.
Just so it said, I wish the bill were a little more uniform. I feel like this should be a state effort because it's inherently unequal. If you do not own property, you cannot benefit.
That's right. It's hard to give credit to someone who doesn't have any property.
Whereas you could easily do that if you were going
This
to
thing's got
state
some
income.
problems.
And on top of that, like I guess the other obvious question the biggest thing that has been happening in the last couple of years with the firefighters folks is their issues with. You've heard about the 9/11 folks who are dealing with all the chemicals. Well, anything now, polyfluoroalkylanes or others. You got folks who are, 40 years old and dying from cancer because in their job they were exposed either in training or anything else by using any kind of chemical retardants, which is why the state of Maryland last year basically said you have to get rid of all the ones that you have.
Firefighting.
Yeah. So you've got so many. So does chemical exposure, it's one thing if you look bloody and you think, okay, well that person's got a problem. If you look like, if you get exposed, if you go to a fire and you end up getting, lung damage, other kind of things, I guess it's a different. So a lot of murky areas.
I think the state law is pretty clear on what you can do. I mean, I don't think we can really deviate too much from that. Whether we're going to add it back in for the volunteers or not, I mean, that's just a choice you have to make.
I mean, I think maybe I'm not explaining very well. The state law simply cites a state statute, and that statute has these list of items that are covered. But the statute also deals with workers' comp and things like that that don't necessarily apply to a volunteer. So instead of just citing the statute again, for the volunteers, we lifted that list of items out and just put them in there specifically. So they're the same, except that the volunteer has a little more duty to prove, because all the professional has to say is, hey, I showed up at 8 o'clock when my shift started and I got hurt at 10. They don't have to deal with other things, whereas the volunteer might have come in at 8, gone somewhere that's not on their business, come back and things like that. So that's
Well, I
the
think
only real difference
The
between them.
compensation's for someone injured in the line of duty, which I think is what the original intent of the bill is supposed to be.
And this, I think, Counselor Ackley was right. This was intended to be, thank you for your service sort of thing.
And back to Mr. Hastings' statement about it only benefiting property owners, maybe this would be an incentive for more people to buy property.
So right now, what we have
If
written,
they're gonna buy property
To not
Get
pay
a-
a tax.
yeah, right, yeah, or get a $1,500 tax.
right now, what we have is under Section D. I guess it is, like trying to find out what section, under Section D. It's
B-
page
B or
4.
D?
Page 4, Section D as in dog. We come down to amount, the property tax credit shall equal 100% of the Wicomico property. No more than $1,500 cap, so it's got a $1,500 cap. The question is what the council wants to, where the council wants to leave that.
I'd keep the $1,500 cap.
Sounds good.
So then where it is today is where we're ready to put it on the agenda and to move forward with it.
So you're
Can we get a clean copy before the agenda?
Yeah. So as the draft is with this legislative bill, then we just simply need it as something that's clean that we can review and as I look up if need be.
Have you talked to the county executive about this? Is he?
He's aware of it. I think he's fully aware of, what we're doing. I don't think, I can't speak for him, Joe.
Well,
Can't
I
speak
don't
for
know
him.
whether he'd had any conversations with you about it or not.
I haven't had any really specific conversations, and generally he knows it's in the brief book, and it's something the council's.
Well, I know when the tax credit came up for the fire department, firemen, he was concerned about the, the budgetary impact of that. And I see in our new budget that he's come to make an offer, that's in the budget. So
Right.
I just wondered if you'd had.
Well, as you know, the only conversation I had was when we were trying to get a fiscal note on it, and they sort of decided they couldn't come up with a fiscal note.
Yeah, okay.
But at that time, they didn't suggest that they were against it because of
Okay,
that.
all right, okay. Well, we'll know if he vetoes it, I guess, right? Maybe it won't.
All right.
So for my own clarification, are you adding that number 5 back in? I just wasn't clear on that. I mean, you asked for a clean copy, but I'm not sure exactly what changed.
I think the idea was that we were not adding it back in because this is the idea of the intent was that they're being compensated for being injured on the job.
I don't think we need to add it back in. I think
We're
it's,
adding it back in.
I thought we all agreed to add it back.
yeah, I thought we agreed not to,
Doesn't
yeah.
matter.
I think it's covered, or it's covered as far as it being related to their duties.
The way it's worded, it wouldn't be covered, because it says going to, from, it's very specific in the statute we cited.
I think it needs to be back in
And
there.
so it doesn't say, you could, I don't know, you could specifically eliminate fundraising or whatever if you thought that was important, but I don't know that if they're still gonna have to show that it had something to do with maintaining the fire company or the rescue squad.
Right.
Like I said, if we're going to add it back in, the language needs to be different.
Okay.
Put it in.
Because right now it's too.
Put it in, we'll
too
have it
open-ended.
we'll have it as a document.
Okay.
We'll have to vote on it, and we can certainly amend it.
Let's use a
from there.
different scenario. They're at the fairgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working a ride or whatever,
Right.
and the fire whistle blows, and they have a heart attack.
That's line of duty.
So is it line of duty or not line of duty?
It is.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's such a gray area there that we've got to, you've either got to make a decision whether it's going to be there or it's not going to be there. It can't kind of be in between. And if they're on the property or they're performing a duty
Right.
beneficial to that fire department, It should be there. It
I
should be
agree.
in.
Actually,
I mean,
Joe,
that's the way I look at it.
in the example you're using, Joe, that would probably be covered with or without that language, because
That's what I'm saying.
if they
You don't
had
need
the
the
heart
language.
attack because they hear the alarm, they go like this, and they take a step in that direction, and drop over, they're reporting to a fire.
They're not-
Okay, but if they're
doing their
The
duty.
way this is, if they're working a ride at, or
They're not
barbecuing
covered.
chicken,
Yeah, I'm all
and
They're
they,
not covered.
they're not covered,
Right.
but they're still
But they should be.
supporting the fire department.
Right.
If they're in a
We
classroom.
should be grateful we got them.
That's not, the
That's what-
purpose of the law is to cover people if you're supporting the fire department, is if you're performing your dangerous duties, as the law says.
Well,
No,
you'll get a big argument about that one.
I can
Well,
see.
That's what the law says. I'm telling you what the law says, Larry. That's not my opinion, that's what
So
the
you're
law
not,
says.
you're not gonna have that problem so much with the paid individuals, because they are going to, their adjudication of disability is gonna be a workers' comp hearing, and they're gonna determine whether they're in the course of or rising out of their employment, and if they are, it answers the question.
Oops, sorry about that. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. I know what you did.
We'll put it in.
Yeah, you could look at it.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.